Chapter 97. The storm was hidden under the calm sea, but in reality, it was already surging. However, no matter if it was Yuhenian or the Yu clan's first branch, they were all hiding in the main house and did not notice anything. Before the sky turned dark, inside the Yu clan's main house, Yuhenian, some important figures of the Yu clan's ninth branch, some outstanding warriors from the side branches, and some important henchmen and stewards gathered for a banquet. This was the Yu clan's tradition. Normally, everyone would eat their own food, but every 10 days, everyone would gather in the main house for a banquet. One reason was to increase the cohesion of the Yu clan, and the other was to discuss some matters that needed to be handled in the Yu clan when everyone was gathered together. The second reason was quite useful for the Yu clan. Everyone was used to discussing matters while eating. As for the first point, even if everyone gathered to eat together, the atmosphere wasn't harmonious. All kinds of hidden conflicts and fights often appeared on the dining table. This time, 3 people were missing from the banquet. One of them was killed while chasing after Chu Xiu, and the other 2 were killed by the Blue Dragon Society's assassins. Of course, they did not know that these 3 people were actually killed by the same person. Because of the pressure from the outside world, this banquet was not as lively as usual. Everyone was very depressed, and the atmosphere was so oppressive that it seemed like water could drip out. Yuhenian drank 2 mouthfuls of wine. He felt that the atmosphere was not right, so he turned to the eldest brother Yu Donglin and said, "Everyone, say a few words. Don't just stand there. Eldest brother, you go first." Yu Donglin stood up, raised his cup and said in a deep voice, "Everyone, don't worry. It's just an assassin from the Blue Dragon Society, it won't be enough to hurt our Yu clan. After this period of time, when the Divine Martial Sect sends people over, our Yu clan will definitely be able to overcome this crisis and use the power of the Divine Martial Sect to reach a higher level." After he finished speaking, there were very few people present who agreed with him. Only the people of the first branch and the other branches that had never had a martial artist of the inner gang realm raised their glasses in agreement because they were weak and did not dare to disrespect the first branch. As for the people on Yu Dongxing's side, they didn't even move. Yuhenian frowned and said to Yu Dongxing, "Third brother, don't just stand there, tell me." Yu Dongxing stood up and said in a deep voice, "Big brother, you make it sound so easy. Our Yu clan's direct descendants and collateral descendants have lost dozens of people, 2 inner aura realm warriors have died, and hundreds of servants have escaped. If this isn't considered a serious injury, then what is?" Yu Donglin frowned. His third brother always liked to go against him and never gave him any face. Hearing this, Yu Donglin also snorted coldly and said, "This is just a small matter. When the Divine Martial Sect sends people over, our Yu clan will be connected by marriage with the Divine Martial Sect. At that time, with the Divine Martial Sect's strength and resources, it will be easy to cultivate more disciples." Yu Dongxing said faintly, "Big brother, what you said is really easy. Disciples can be cultivated again, but what about the dead people? Can the 4th prince, 5th brother, and the direct descendants and collateral descendants who died come back to life? There is still a month before the Divine Martial Sect will send people over. What about the people who died in this period of time? Yu Donglin, the people who died were not from the first branch, so you don't feel sorry for them?" Yu Dongxing's last sentence actually called Yu Donglin by his name. In the Yu clan, which had strict family rules, this was already a violation of the rules and a big taboo. Yu Donglin pointed at Yu Dongxing, so angry that he couldn't say anything. Yuhenian suddenly slammed the table and shouted, "Third brother! What the hell are you talking about? Inviting the people from the Divine Martial Sect was my decision. Are you dissatisfied with me? Quickly apologize to your big brother." With Yuhenian's position in the Yu clan, no one dared to go against him when he was angry in the past. However, Yu Dongxing revealed a cold smile. "Apologize? Why should I apologize? Because of a person's stupid decision, he brought the Yu clan into danger. Do I need to apologize to this kind of person? Yu Dongxing looked straight at Yu Henian and said in a deep voice, "Father, you are old and have changed. You don't have the drive you used to have. Do you still remember the Yu clan's teachings? In order to build a clan, we must be cautious. When a horse steps into the martial world, we must take the lead. I have done the first two things. No matter if it is Biling Manor or Linzhong County, who has ever said anything bad about my third brother? But what about the first branch? They used their Yu clan's identity to run amok outside. It was because Yu Luchuan listened to Nye Donglu's persuasion and sent his seventh brother to kill Chu Xiu. In the end, his seventh brother was killed. It was because of the first branch and Yu Luchuan's greed. Not only did they cancel the marriage, they also wanted to exterminate the Mu clan. Not only did they exterminate the Mu clan, they did not even kill everyone. That's why today's disaster happened. Father, you had to stay at the Biling mansion and couldn't go out. It was me who followed second brother and led the team. I took the lead and fought against the bandits all the way to the western Chu Chuanshu kingdom to trade. I had to lower my voice to the local forces of the martial arts world, kowtowing and kneeling to them. After the assassins of the Blue Dragon Society kill the first branch, you will still be the elder of the Yu clan. However, for now, please go to your own room and rest for a while. When he said this, Yu Henian's expression suddenly changed. He had just started to circulate his qi when he felt a sharp pain in his dantian. A force was pulling his qi, causing him to have to use all his strength to suppress it. He could not release his qi at all. Only now did he remember that at the table, he was the one who spoke first and drank 2 mouthfuls of wine. The others did not have the time to drink, and the people on Yu Dongxing's side did not even move. The loyal old butler of the Yu clan immediately stood in front of Yu Henian to protect him. Yu Dongxing immediately shouted, "Do it." When he said this, the warriors on his side immediately took out their weapons. Someone even took out a whistling arrow and shot it towards the sky. Outside the main residence, the warriors on Yu Dongxing's side heard the whistling arrow and immediately started to kill the Yu clan's warriors who did not belong to their side. The Yu clan's wall was broken. In an instant, the Yu clan had already become a river of blood. The number of people who died was even more than the number of people killed by Chu Xiu. Chapter 98. Sometimes, the fastest way to kill someone was not with a sword, but with the human heart. Chu Xiu used a few days' time to kill less than 100 people under the Yu clan's eyes, just to bring endless fear and oppression to the Yu clan. At the last moment, he planted a seed of resentment in Yu Dongxing's heart, and finally caused the whole Yu clan to explode. At this time, Chu Xiu stood on a roof not far from the Yu clan, silently watching the Yu clan's massacre. When those Yu clan's disciples attacked, they were incomparably fierce, completely aiming to take the other party's life. Although they were now divided into 2 camps, they were still the same clansmen. Now that they attacked so fiercely, it was not only because they were in opposing camps, but also because they needed to vent their anger, they needed to vent through killing. These days, under the shadow of Chu Xiu, they did not know when they would be killed, and did not know if they could live until dawn. This kind of hovering between life and death, even their own lives were not in their own control, the feeling was not good. That kind of repressed feeling that wanted to go crazy finally found a way to vent today. Weapons slashed through the other party's body, feeling the warmth of the blood spurting out. Until now, those Yu clan's warriors felt as if they were still alive, and at the same time, because of the stimulation of blood and killing, they became incomparably crazy. Chu Xiu closed his eyes, feeling the strong killing intent and crazy blood in the air. Both of his eyes began to gradually turn red, but his rationality suppressed this crazy killing intent. His skills belonged to the righteous path, such as the Xian Tian skill, but most of them belonged to the demonic path. Condensing the killing intent and blood, comprehending the unique power of killing, was very beneficial to Chu Xiu, but at the same time, this power was also trying to influence Chu Xiu's mind. Lu Fengxian had once advised Chu Xiu to be more careful, not to kill too much, in case he lost his mind because of the killing intent. Chu Xiu knew this, but he didn't want to change it. Now, he was taking the initiative to integrate this power. Because this was the path he wanted to walk. No matter if it was killing intent or baleful qi or anything else, these things were just tools in Chu Xiu's eyes. If a person was afraid of being controlled by a tool, then they were either trash or a failure. Meanwhile, at the main house, although Yu Dongxing was not as crazy as the other Yu clan members, he had almost reached the point where he would fight to the death. There were 4 people on Yu Dongxing's side. Chen Dingwu, Yu clan's 9th brother, and Yu Ping from the Yu clan's branch family all wanted to help him. The Yu clan's eldest brother's strength was mediocre. Although the Yu clan's loyal old butler's strength was not bad, he was already old and his battle strength had declined greatly. On the Yu clan side, the only one who could truly threaten Yu Dongxing and the others was Yu Henian. Although Yu Henian had been plotted against by Yu Dongxing and was poisoned by the 3 worms 3 flower powder, he was still an outer aura realm warrior. Even if he couldn't release his inner aura temporarily, his battle experience and martial skills were not something that Yu Dongxing could compare to. Fighting 1 against 2, Yu Henian directly suppressed Yu Dongxing and Yu clan's 9th brother. Although these 2 people had decided to force Yu Henian to abdicate, they didn't really have the intention to kill Yu Henian. After all, this was their father. If they were asked to commit patricide, forget about the fact that they couldn't do it. Even if they really did, their brother's reputation in Linzhong County would be tarnished. They would be completely banished to the demon path and be despised by everyone. Hence, they didn't dare to use their full strength. Instead, they wouldn't be able to defeat Yu Henian. The more they fought, the uglier Yu Dongxing's expression became. He had prepared a lot, but he still neglected the strength of an outer aura realm warrior. Would an outer aura realm warrior be the same as an inner aura realm warrior if they didn't use their inner aura realm warrior? He was still a little too naive. However, although their side was being suppressed, the Yu clan's eldest brother, the Yu clan's old butler, was being suppressed by his opponent, and was even heavily injured. Chen Dingwu was Yu Dongxing's good friend. Naturally, he would wholeheartedly stand on Yu Dongxing's side. He wouldn't show mercy when he attacked. With his full strength, after a few dozen moves, Chen Dingwu had already chopped off the Yu clan's old butler's hands with 2 curved blades, and finally stabbed the old butler's chest. Seeing the old butler who had served him for his entire life being killed, Yu Henian's eyes immediately turned red. This group of unfilial sons really wanted him to die. Yu Henian couldn't care less about the poison in his body anymore. He circulated the innate qi around his body, and with a loud bang, a cyan-colored aura suddenly exploded. The long sword in his hand instantly became incomparably heavy, as if Mount Tai was pressing down on him. The sword aura exploded, directly sending Yu Dongxing's sword flying, leaving a mournful sword scar on his chest. After that, Yu Henian directly stretched out his hand, and the surrounding air started to become sticky. The Yu clan's 9th brother was shocked to discover that his body was actually involuntarily sucked towards Yu Henian. As his palm fell, it was like a yiksha exploring the sea, setting off countless waves in the air. With a loud bang, it landed on the Yu clan's 9th brother's dantian, directly crippling his dantian, causing him to vomit blood and fly out. Towards these unfilial sons, Yu Henian thought that not killing them was already merciful. In the blink of an eye, one of them was crippled, and the other was heavily injured. Yu Dongxing covered his own wound, his eyes bloodshot, and said hatefully, "See exploring divine palm. At that time, I begged you for a few months, but you never taught me this move." Yu Henian said coldly, "Humph. You want me to teach you so that you can deal with me in the future?" Yu Henian didn't continue to talk nonsense with him. On the other side, after Chen Dingwu and Yu Ping joined hands, they had already heavily injured Yu Donglin, causing him to vomit blood and retreat. Seeing this scene, Yu Henian immediately made his move, using the same mountain-suppressing sword art. This seemingly mediocre sword art, in Euhenian's hands, exploded with incomparable sharpness. With a single mountain-suppressing sword, Chen Dingwu's hands and Yu Ping's sword shattered with a loud bang. The long sword in Euhenian's hand exploded with earth energy, and he killed Chen Dingwu on the spot with just a few moves. He didn't show any mercy at all. Looking at Chen Dingwu's corpse, Euhenian said coldly, "My Yu family has provided you with food and clothing for all these years, and provided for your cultivation. In the end, you didn't even think about repaying our kindness. You deserve to die." Chen Dingwu wasn't his son, but an outsider. Moreover, an outsider who had a disloyal heart. If he didn't kill him, how could he keep him alive for the new year? On the other side, Yu Ping was completely stunned. Then, a mournful look appeared on his face. Defeated, they still lost. Their plan went smoothly, but they lost because of Euhenian's strength. The strength of a physical invulnerability realm expert was too terrifying. Even if they attacked secretly, they wouldn't be able to withstand a few outbursts from the other party. Moreover, Yu Dongxing and Yu Ping didn't dare to kill Yu Ping because of their misgivings. In the end, the other party turned the tables around. Yu Ping was also very shameless. Seeing that the situation was hopeless, he immediately knelt down in front of Euhenian and said with a trembling voice, "Elder, it was Yu Dongxing who tricked me into doing this. Otherwise, I wouldn't have dared to attack you. The Yu family has its own rules. I am willing to accept the punishment, but I hope that Elder will spare my descendants and relatives." Euhenian walked over and looked at Yu Ping expressionlessly. Suddenly, he struck his palm towards the top of Yu Ping's head. When Yu Ping was defenseless, he killed him with a single strike. Yu Ping was only a branch of the family, and they were several generations apart. Yu Ping wasn't even his biological son. After rebelling, he still wanted to accept the punishment and spare the lives of his descendants and relatives? Naive. However, after this palm strike, Euhenian suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was also covered with a layer of black. The 3-bug 3-flower powder was still effective. However, there were hundreds of different recipes for the 3-bug 3-flower powder. Any 3 poisonous flowers and 3 poisonous insects could be used to concoct the 3-bug 3-flower powder. The effects of the 3-bug 3-flower powder were also different. In fact, Yu Dongxing still had a more potent poison in his hands. However, he didn't dare to use it. He was afraid that if he really poisoned Euhenian to death, he would have to bear the crime of killing his own father. Therefore, he chose to use this kind of poison that was specially used to suppress innate qi. However, who would have thought that Euhenian would be even more ruthless than him? He would rather use innate qi at the risk of getting injured. In the blink of an eye, he had already turned the situation around. Looking at Euhenian walking towards him expressionlessly, Yu Dongxing's eyes flashed with a hint of madness. Euhenian might not kill him, but he would definitely cripple him. For a martial artist, being crippled was no different from being killed. This was especially true for Yu Dongxing, who was a person with great ambitions. Crippling his martial arts was basically making him wish he was dead. He didn't want to die. Therefore, Yu Dongxing directly shouted, "What are you waiting for? What are you still waiting for? Don't you want to finish your mission?" Euhenian's footsteps suddenly stopped. He suddenly looked at Yu Dongxing. Who was he talking to? What mission? Suddenly, Euhenian felt that he seemed to have overlooked something. At this moment, the main door of the residence was suddenly pushed open. From time to time, the sounds of killing could be heard coming from outside. Under the bloody night, a black-clothed man with a long saber strapped to his waist stepped into the courtyard as if he was taking a stroll. He wore a black iron bamboo hat with golden patterns. His face was expressionless black iron mask. In this mournful night, everything seemed incomparably strange and austere. Chapter 99. The moment he saw Chu Xiu, Euhenian's expression changed from shock to extreme anger. He suddenly turned his head to look at Yu Dongxing. His gaze was as if he wanted to eat him alive. Unfilial son, asking a tiger for its skin. Do you know what you are doing? Yu Dongxing said coldly, of course I know. But Lord Father, don't forget who caused all of this. If it wasn't for Yu Donglin and his son, how could our Yu clan provoke the assassins of the Blue Dragon Society? Lord Father, don't blame me. You are too biased. The position of the clan master should be given to the capable. I have fought for this position for half my life, and also for the Yu clan. In the end, I am not as good as that Yu Luchuan who hooked up with a woman outside. I can't accept this. Chu Xiu looked at Yu Dongxing. He suddenly felt that this scene was somewhat familiar. Then, Chu Xiu looked at Yu Henian and shook his head. Yu Henian, even your own son hates you so much. It seems that you are a failure as a person. Yu Henian ignored Chu Xiu's ridicule. He only looked at Chu Xiu and said, is there really no room for reconciliation? You should know that our Yu clan's background is many times stronger than the Mu clan's. Whatever the Mu clan can give you, our Yu clan can also give you several times more. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, it's a pity. There are rules for killing people. The Blue Dragon Society also has its own rules. Although the items are good, if you break the rules of the Blue Dragon Society, you can easily lose your life even if you take them. As the strongest assassin organization in the world, the Blue Dragon Society naturally had its own rules. Yu Henian did not expect the other party to really give in. Today's matter could not be resolved peacefully. He took a deep breath, as if he wanted to say something, but he suddenly slashed his sword at Chu Xiu. The momentum of the sword was like a mountain, and it was extremely heavy. The sword force even erupted with a bang and swept over, sealing off all traces of Chu Xiu dodging. Chu Xiu's right hand moved, and the red sleeve blade appeared in his hand. He slashed out with the long blade, and a strange scarlet evil chi condensed on the blade, colliding with the sword aura. Suddenly, a loud sound erupted, and Chu Xiu's figure was blasted back a few steps. Moving his numb wrist, Chu Xiu frowned slightly. At the 5th level of the Imperial Qi realm, the disparity between martial artists of different levels had indeed become much greater. At the physical invulnerability realm, under the release of the earth energy, the powerful force that even Chu Xiu's piercing the sun and moon couldn't completely block, and was instantly suppressed. This was under the situation where the other party was already poisoned, and his internal strength was suppressed. If he was at his peak, Chu Xiu really did not have the confidence to fight against this Yu Henian. But in other words, the current Yu Henian was already poisoned. How long could he withstand such a powerful attack? And indeed, just as Chu Xiu thought, Yu Henian was already a little anxious. He originally thought that the assassin from the Blue Dragon Society was a 5th level of the physical invulnerability realm, but who would have thought that the other party was only at the internal invulnerability realm? This was a little funny. Their big Yu clan was actually almost torn apart by an internal invulnerability realm warrior, and almost exterminated. This was simply a joke. But in other words, since the other party was only at the internal invulnerability realm, it meant that he had the hope of killing the other party. The Yu clan's mountain-suppressing sword art was both offensive and defensive. In fact, it was not a martial art that leaned towards taking the initiative to attack. The safest way was to drag it out until the other party's strength was exhausted, and then crush it with the force of Mount Tai. But now, Yu Henian could not drag it out for so long. The longer he dragged it out, the more the poison in his body would spread. At that time, let alone an internal invulnerability realm warrior, even an innate rancor would be able to easily kill him. Therefore, facing this situation, Yu Henian decisively chose not to suppress the poison first. Instead, the earth energy around his body suddenly exploded, and with a boundless momentum, he attacked Chu Xiu. The mountain suppressing the sword, with a green sword aura, slid down, and in an instant, all of Chu Xiu's escape routes were sealed, as if a huge mountain was pressing down on him. His opponent directly used force to suppress him. Chu Xiu could not display the strange nimbleness of the red-sleeve dusk drizzle blade technique. He could only use the piercing sun and moon chi to burst out the killing intent in his body to resist. Previously, when he was massacring the Yu clan, Chu Xiu had taken the initiative to fuse his killing intent with his baleful chi. Now, this power had already condensed into a terrifying baleful blood chi. It was not astral energy, but when it suddenly erupted, it had a powerful might that was not inferior to astral energy. As the blood aura entered his body, Chu Xiu's eyes had already turned scarlet, looking incomparably crazy. But at the same time, Chu Xiu's mind was extremely clear. Facing the powerful sword aura that blotted out the sky and covered the earth, every slash of his blade was able to shatter a sword aura. Although he himself was also repelled, he was extremely calm and did not suffer any injuries. Yu Henian was already a little anxious. After forcing Chu Xiu to retreat once again, he directly blasted out a palm strike. Yiksha exploring the sea, waves explode. Most of the Yu clan's warriors were not very good at fighting. Only he, the clan master, had actually cultivated an extremely powerful palm technique in addition to sword techniques. Under the powerful palm force of the ocean-exploring divine palm, Chu Xiu did not dodge or evade. His left hand struck out with the heaven-extinguishing earth-destroying great purple sun palm. When both palms met, a huge explosion of earth energy was immediately produced. The bluestone ground under Chu Xiu's feet shattered inch by inch. He was directly sent flying more than 10 steps backwards. The palm force entered his body, and a trace of blood seeped out of his mouth. On the other side, although Yu Henian did not retreat, his left hand had turned purplish-black. The purple sun demonic flame entered his body, and the burning pain immediately caused him to groan. His eyes revealed a terrified expression. This palm force was simply like maggots in the bones. It followed along his innate chi meridians and burned his whole body. Although he could use his own inner energy to temporarily suppress it, doing so in a battle was simply courting death. Chu Xiu's eyes flashed with a cold light. In a few steps, he had already arrived in front of Yu Henian. The sword force in his hand fell down with a loud rumble like a continuous drizzle. Unexpectedly, it started to suppress Yu Henian. Courting death. A ruthless look flashed in Yu Henian's eyes. This killer from the Blue Dragon Society was indeed extremely difficult to deal with. He was obviously only at the inner aura realm, but he had all kinds of strange and powerful martial arts. Moreover, his opponent's foundation was so strong that it did not seem like he was an inner aura realm warrior. If this dragged on, his side would turn from being difficult to deal with into a dangerous situation. A red light flashed in Yu Henian's hand. The red light was like fresh blood. At this moment, even his whole body's chi and blood flowed into the long sword in his hand. As his sword slashed down, a bright red sword light exploded with a loud rumble, even illuminating half of the courtyard. As the long sword fell, Yu Henian's sword force was simple and desolate, but it carried an endless amount of Twilight's killing intent. Mountain River Sunset Sword. This sword art was not from the Yu clan's mountain guarding sword art. It was a remnant of a powerful sword art. It was so powerful that he simply could not cultivate it normally. There was only one way to activate the Mountain River Sunset Sword. That was to use his own chi and blood as a guide. Using his own inner energy to ignite his chi and blood, turning it into the setting sun that was as red as blood. Only then would he be able to achieve the true meaning of sword intent. Losing chi and blood was not a good feeling for any warrior, especially for Yu Henian who had already been poisoned. Moreover, he had also been hit by Chu Xiu's great purple sun palm. After losing chi and blood, it was easy for his foundation to be injured. However, at this moment, he did not care so much. Under the Mountain River Sunset Sword, the Twilight's killing intent descended. Everything would return to nirvana. However, at this moment, Chu Xiu suddenly raised his head. There was no longer any expression in his eyes. His deep and serene eyes seemed to lead to the 9 serenities of hell, strange and terrifying. The red sleeve blade was raised. The blade's blade rippled with crimson light, but it also carried a vague black aura. It was tainted with endless deathly stillness, and despair. As Chu Xiu's blade slashed down, the terrifying black sword light completely covered the crimson light. It also directly shattered the seemingly resplendent sunset river. On the other side, Euhenian's eyes revealed endless fear. He had never seen such a terrifying blade before. It was neither life nor death. The blade intent formed by endless hatred could only bring endless despair to people. That blade seemed to have slashed from hell. It tore everything in front of him apart. It slashed at the flesh, but it also wanted to slash the opponent's soul into the Avicii hell, forever falling into the endless cycle of reincarnation. After the blade, everything dissipated. There was no trace of injury on Euhenian's body, but blood flowed along his body like flowing water. It was as if there were wounds all over his body. At this moment, Chu Xiu's hand that was holding the blade was trembling. After a few breaths, the light in his eyes gradually recovered. Only then did he suppress the crazy power of hatred in his heart. This was the power of the Avicii Dao's 3 blades. This terrifying power of hell was irresistible. It made the opponent feel despair. At the same time, the backlash also made him feel despair. Fortunately, Chu Xiu's previous estimation was right. The power of the Avicii Dao's 3 blades was indeed terrifying, but he could suppress it. So now, Chu Xiu had almost figured out the knack of this blade technique. He could use it, but he had to use it carefully. Chapter 100. The Yu clan's mansion had already turned into a river of blood. It was the same in the main house. The only inner strong realm warriors who survived were Yu Donglin, who had a look of despair on his face, and Yu Dongxing, who had a complicated look on his face. Euhenian died in the end, but he didn't feel happy. Euhenian was his father after all. Although Euhenian didn't die in his hands, he still had to bear the blame. Betraying the clan and killing his father. With such a big crime, Yu Dongxing's reputation in Linzhong Commandery would probably spread far and wide, and everyone would want to beat him up. So now, Yu Dongxing also felt a little regretful. Why was he so impulsive and made such a decision in a hurry? Yu Dongxing turned his gaze to Chu Xiu. Just as he was about to say something, Chu Xiu also turned his head to him. Because Chu Xiu was wearing a black iron mask, Yu Dongxing couldn't see Chu Xiu's expression clearly, but he felt something was wrong from Chu Xiu's eyes. But before he could do anything, the knife in Chu Xiu's hand suddenly pierced through him. A lot of blood gushed out. Yu Dongxing grabbed the knife and stared at Chu Xiu. He didn't understand why this killer from the Blue Dragon Society wanted to kill him again. Pulling out the red sleeve knife, Chu Xiu lowered his body and said lightly in Yu Dongxing's ear, "I seem to have forgotten to tell you something. Actually, the mission I received was not to kill Yu Luchuan, but to destroy the whole Yu clan." As soon as he said this, Yu Dongxing's eyes flashed with endless regret. They were wrong from the beginning. When they saw the word Mu and thought about the Mu family's heritage, they all thought that the surviving member of the Mu family only wanted to kill Yu Luchuan for revenge. However, who would have thought that the surviving members of the Mu clan would actually want to exterminate the entire Yu clan? Moreover, this assassin from the Blue Dragon Society must have gone crazy to actually accept such a crazy mission. Wanting to destroy the Yu clan with the strength of an internal aura realm was simply a fantasy. But now, this person in front of him had done it. Euhenian was dead, and the rest of the Yu clan's inner aura realm warriors were almost all dead. The whole Yu clan was fighting amongst themselves, and their eyes had already turned red from killing. The Yu clan was destroyed by the hands of this terrifying person in front of them, and even more so by his own hands. Previously, Euhenian had said that he was asking a tiger for its skin, but what he was doing now was simply inviting a wolf into the house. However, at this time, Yu Dongxing had no time to regret. His consciousness gradually dissipated, and everything in front of him was already pitch black. In the end, he was no longer breathing. Looking at Yu Dongxing's corpse on the ground, Chu Xiu felt a little emotional. This Yu Dongxing's experience was actually very similar to his. Back then, when Chu Xiu was in the Chu clan, his ability was also outstanding, but his cheap father had never thought of passing the clan master position to him. Although Chu Zongguang did so because of the glazed gold silk gu, which was rather special, in fact, even without it, unless Chu Xiu killed all three of his brothers, he would not have the clan master position. And now, this Yu Dongxing was the same. In the information that Chu Xiu had obtained, his strength and ability were the top among the Yu clan's 9 branches. Unfortunately, Yu Henian still favored his eldest son and eldest grandson the most. That was why when Chu Xiu was choosing his target, he chose Yu Dongxing as a breakthrough point. Killing was easy, but destroying the heart was difficult. Yu Dongxing's state of mind had a flaw, which was why Chu Xiu could take advantage of it. Speaking of which, it was very interesting. Back then, when Chu Xiu lured the Dragon Rider's imperial army, Chu Xiu thought that it was the same as asking a tiger for its skin. However, Chu Xiu took advantage of the conflict between the 2 tigers to benefit himself. As for this Yu Dongxing, he had completely led the wolf into the house, and in the end, the entire Yu clan was devoured by this evil wolf, Chu Xiu. Falling to this state was not only because Yu Dongxing was not strong enough, but also because he was not ruthless enough. At that time, Chu Xiu dared to exterminate the entire Chu clan, but now, Yu Dongxing still shed all pretenses of cordiality. Even when he had already begun to force the Yu clan to abdicate and rebel, he still held back, not daring to kill Yu Henian. Even if there was no Chu Xiu, he would still be defeated this time. Looking at the Yu clan's 9th brother, whose cultivation had been destroyed by Yu Henian, Chu Xiu did not hesitate and immediately added another slash, beheading him. Then, he walked towards Yu Donglin and the others. Other than Yu Donglin, the already injured Inner Aura Realm warrior, there were also some of the Yu clan's 9th branch's stewards, guests, and so on. Just now, some of them were fighting, while others were hiding in a corner, not wanting to get involved in the Yu clan's internal strife. In the end, the development of the situation was full of twists and turns. From the beginning, this matter was the Blue Dragon Society's scheme. Yu Dongxing's rebellion was also instigated by him. This was a little too terrifying. When they saw Chu Xiu walking towards them, this group of people were so scared that they broke out in cold sweat. Just now, when Yu Henian and Yu Dongxing fought, they were not afraid. Anyway, no matter which side won, they would definitely need to use them. However, this Blue Dragon Society's assassins wanted to exterminate the entire Yu clan. Was there a need to ask whether they were part of the Yu clan? At this time, Yu Donglin's face suddenly revealed a ruthless expression. He had already been seriously injured during the fight, but now he could not care so much. He directly rushed towards Chu Xiu, turned his head and shouted, "Run!" Of course, his shout was not directed at the Yu clan's henchmen and stewards, but at Yu Luchuan. The Yu clan was already finished. However, as long as Yu Luchuan escaped to the Divine Martial Gate, at that time, not to mention an assassin from the Blue Dragon Society would not be able to kill Yu Luchuan. Even if the leader of the Blue Dragon Society came, he would not be able to kill Yu Luchuan. Yu Donglin had been mediocre his whole life. Although he was the eldest son of the Yu clan, as the Yu clan's eldest son, he had been nurtured by Yu Henian as the clan leader's successor when he was born. With so many things instilled in him, although Yu Donglin did not appear to be trash, he was still not as good as Yu Dongxing, a warrior who had been tempered in the pugilistic world. However, now that he was facing such a terrifying existence like Chu Xiu, he finally had a trace of drive. He was prepared to risk his life to stop Chu Xiu, so that his son could escape. Only then did Yu Luchuan and the Yu clan's henchmen react. They immediately turned around and ran, especially Yu Luchuan, who was not worried about his father's safety at all. Yu Donglin did not even put Chu Xiu in his eyes when he was at his peak, let alone a heavily injured Yu Donglin. Facing the crazed Yu Donglin, Chu Xiu directly used the great sacrificial grappling hand to tear off his opponent's arm, and finally chopped off his opponent's head. Looking at the direction in which Yu Luchuan escaped, Chu Xiu laughed coldly and immediately chased after him. At this time, Yu Luchuan had already jumped over the wall and escaped from the Yu clan. He was running as if his life depended on it. His heart was already filled with fear and 3 words, "I can't die." He was still young, he still had many years to live. Moreover, he had hooked up with the daughter of the sect leader of the divine martial sect. His future was limitless. He did not care if he would be ridiculed by other people in the martial arts world for relying on women to climb up the ranks. Anyway, as long as he married into the divine martial sect, he would not need to curry favor with Nye Donglu anymore. Even at that time, he would be on equal footing with Nye Donglu. Therefore, he could not die now. However, at this time, in the corner of the long street, a pitch-black silhouette stood there, as if it was waiting for him there. Yu Luchuan's face was filled with fear. He retreated step by step, his mouth still continuously begging for mercy, "Don't kill me." Chu Xiu said faintly, "Young Master Yu, are you afraid now? Didn't you say that you would not let go of me? Why are you so scared now?" Hearing this sentence, Yu Luchuan suddenly felt that the voice of the Blue Dragon Society assassin in front of him was a little familiar. He suddenly raised his head and said in a frightened voice, "Chu Xiu. You are Chu Xiu." He never thought that the Chu Xiu who was chased by the martial arts world in the Linzhong Commandery would actually turn around and become an assassin of the Blue Dragon Society. His own Yu clan was also completely annihilated in the hands of the assassin. The red sleeve blade in Chu Xiu's hand emitted a crimson glow, it was extremely dazzling in the night. You guessed it right. No matter what, you and I can be considered as acquaintances. I will let you know the truth before you die. That should be enough, right? As soon as he finished speaking, a head flew into the air. Chu Xiu did not even look at Yu Luchuan's corpse as he directly turned around and ran towards the Yu clan. The Yu clan was now completely scattered. This internal strife had almost killed 80% of them. Of course, Chu Xiu did not have the ability to chase and kill the remaining people one by one. However, as the Yu clan was a big clan in the Linzhong Commandery, the main residents of the Yu clan had many treasures and cultivation resources. Before dawn, Chu Xiu could go and plunder them. However, when he was plundering those cultivation resources, Chu Xiu was a little regretful. He should have left one of the Yu clan's direct descendants alive. For example, the Yu clan's 9th brother who had already been crippled. For a big clan like the Yu clan, the most precious cultivation resources would be hidden in a special secret room with many layers of protection mechanisms. Even if one were to forcefully open the room, it would be extremely strenuous. It would be impossible to open it in one night. If there was a direct descendant of the Yu clan here, he would probably know the method to open it. Therefore, the things that Chu Xiu obtained that night were actually not much. At most, it was 1/10 of the Yu clan's total resources. After seeing that the sky was already bright, Chu Xiu immediately took the things and left. Chapter 101. The massacre in the Yu clan was not hidden from others. With such a huge commotion, the other clans in the Biling mansion had already found out about it when they started fighting. But so what if they knew? No matter which side the Yu clan was fighting on, these small clans did not have the mood to care. Most importantly, they did not dare to care. When the sun rose, these small clans also sent people to the Yu clan to check on the situation. They did not dare to enter the courtyard. They only found that the Yu clan's mansion was unusually quiet, and there was a strong smell of blood wafting from it. After receiving this news, the leaders of the various clans personally went to the Yu clan to check on the situation. However, when they pushed open the door of the Yu clan's mansion, the smell of blood almost made them tumble. The entire Yu clan's mansion was filled with corpses. From the looks of it, they had all killed each other. In the Yu clan's main residence, Yu Henian, who had dominated the Biling mansion for decades, had died a horrible death. All the blood in his body had drained, but strangely, there was not a single wound on his body. The other Yu clan's internal strength realm warriors had also died here. The entire Yu clan had been annihilated overnight. This horrifying scene made the other clans in the Biling mansion panic. At this time, they still did not think that this was done by the Blue Dragon Society's assassin. Although the Yu clan had been annihilated, it was impossible for there to be no survivors. During the massacre yesterday, some of the collateral clansmen or servants who had stayed outside could not stand the killing and fled the Yu clan. There were also the henchmen and stewards who had seen Chu Xiu attack in the main residence. Most of them had escaped successfully. Some of these people did not go down the mountain. They were still hiding in the Biling mansion. They were found by the other forces of the Biling mansion and questioned them one by one. After gathering all the information together, they finally knew that the Yu clan had been annihilated by a single person. Previously, when the Azure Dragon Association's assassins were killing people, they had thought that they were simply killing people. They never thought that it was a trap from the beginning, a trap that trapped the Yu clan in a net, and finally killed them. They were shocked by the strength of the Blue Dragon Society assassin, and even more shocked by the strange methods of the Blue Dragon Society assassin. Thinking up to this point, everyone simultaneously shivered. Fortunately, they didn't stubbornly help the Yu clan to search for the assassin of the Blue Dragon Society. Otherwise, looking at the Yu clan's current state, they probably wouldn't even know how they died. After understanding everything, everyone obediently retreated from the Yu clan, not taking a single thing. If the Yu clan had simply been exterminated, they wouldn't mind dividing up the Yu clan's assets. However, they had heard from one of the Yu clan's branch family members that the Yu clan had already sent people to the Divine Martial Gate to ask for reinforcements. They reckoned that the reinforcements would be arriving at the Divine Martial Gate soon. It didn't matter if they divided the Yu clan's things, but they were afraid that when the Divine Martial sect came, they would vent their anger on them. Hence, not only did these people not touch the Yu clan's things, they even took the initiative to help the Yu clan clean up the corpses. Especially that Yu Luchuan, whose head had been separated from his body, he was placed in an ice coffin by these people to be preserved. What happened next was not something they could meddle in, nor was it something they dared to meddle in. At this time, after Chu Xiu had exterminated the Yu clan, he directly went to the rundown temple where he and Mu Zi had agreed to meet. When he pushed the door open and entered, Chu Xiu was surprised to find that Mu Zi had actually stayed there the whole time. Chu Xiu secretly shook his head. With this woman's hatred towards the Yu clan, if he gave the 3 blades of Avicii to Mu Zi, her cultivation speed would probably be even faster than Chu Xiu's. Of course, she would also die even faster. Chu Xiu looked at Mu Zi and said, "The mission is completed. All the direct descendants of the Yu clan's 9 branches are all dead. From now on, the Yu clan will no longer exist in the Biling prefecture. I didn't bring you Yu Luchuan's head. I don't think it's convenient for me to bring it with me. But I think you shouldn't use it to vent your anger. After all, the entire Yu clan has been buried with you. This matter should have spread throughout the Biling prefecture by now. Just go and ask around." Mu Zi said softly, "No need. I already know. Were you in the Biling prefecture last night?" Mu Zi shook her head and said, "No. My Mu clan has been rooted in the Biling prefecture for hundreds of years. There will always be some loyal people who are willing to pass information to me." After pausing for a while, Mu Zi said, "Thank you." Chu Xiu said lightly, "I've taken someone's money to eliminate a disaster. The Blue Dragon Society earns money from killing people. Naturally, I'm the same." Although Chu Xiu had already said so, Mu Zi still stubbornly thanked Chu Xiu. This was because she knew that with the things left behind by the Mu clan, no one would even accept the mission to kill Yu Luchuan, let alone hire an assassin from the Blue Dragon Society to exterminate the Yu clan. At first, when this person appeared before her, Mu Zi did not have any confidence. This was just an attempt when she was in despair. She did not expect that an internal Aura Realm warrior would actually exterminate the Yu clan. Suddenly, she got her revenge. But now, Mu Zi felt empty. In the past, what supported Mu Zi was hatred. But now, her enemies were dead. She did not even have anyone to hate. She did not know what she should do. After thanking Chu Xiu, Mu Zi's eyes showed a hint of emptiness. At this moment, she even thought of dying. She had finally gotten her revenge. She also had an explanation to the Mu clan. It was time for her to accompany her father, mother, and her loved ones. Originally, Chu Xiu wanted to leave after giving his instructions. But at this moment, he suddenly saw a hint of death in Mu Zi's eyes. Pausing, Chu Xiu did not turn his head and said lightly, "Do you want to die?" Actually, sometimes dying is easy, but living is more difficult. But in one's life, wouldn't it be very boring if one only pursues 2 steps from life to death? In this life, one should not only live life and death, but also live a life of right and wrong. It's not what others say, but what is right and wrong in one's heart. After saying this, Chu Xiu turned around and left. He did not care whether Mu Zi would die or not. He was good at killing people, not saving people. Moreover, Chu Xiu was not a person who liked to meddle in other people's business. His words were just based on his feelings. It was for himself in his previous life, and it was also for himself in the present. As for whether Mu Zi listened to these words and whether she would still want to commit suicide, Chu Xiu did not have the mood to care. Killing a person was easy, but saving a person who wanted to die was very difficult. Looking at Chu Xiu's back as he left, Mu Zi's eyes showed a strange expression. Life and death? Right or wrong? She still did not know what she should do, but she seemed to feel that she should not die so simply. Mu Zi took out a knife from behind her. It was a curved knife that was shorter than Chu Xiu's red sleeve knife, but with a wider arc. This knife was a 4th Revolution precious weapon of the Mu family. Because its shape was like a beauty's curved eyebrows, it was called embroidered eyebrows. When Mu Zi was a child, she wanted to learn the knife, but her father did not let her because it seemed a little fierce for a girl to learn the knife, which was not the temperament of a lady from a noble family. Therefore, her father specially found a guest to teach her swordsmanship. But now, holding the embroidered eyebrows knife in her hand, Mu Zi seemed to have grasped her own heart. Walking out of the dilapidated temple and looking in the direction Chu Xiu left, Mu Zi opened her mouth and silently spat out the word, "Thank you." Her figure also disappeared from the barren mountain. Chu Xiu's mission had been completed, so he naturally did not want to stay in Linzhong Commandery any longer. After obtaining the Yu clan's resources, he also wanted to return to the Blue Dragon Society to recuperate. 3 days later, 2 groups of people went up the mountain one after the other outside the Biling mansion. There were only a dozen people in the first group, but their strength was abnormally strong. The weakest among them was at the inner supreme realm. There were also 2 old men among them. Their auras were restrained, but there was a glimmer of divine light in their eyes. With just a glance, they gave people a great deal of pressure. The weakest of these 2 people were experts at the 3-flower condensation realm or the 5-chi condensation realm. At this moment, this group of experts was surrounding a little girl. It was obvious that this little girl was the center of the group. This little girl looked to be less than 20 years old. Although she could not be considered extremely beautiful, she had good facial features. Her face was fair and clean, and her figure was tall and slim. The strangest thing was that she was wearing a white tight-fitting warrior's outfit. Usually, only men would wear this kind of clothing. Although this little girl looked much more heroic in this outfit, it also gave people a feeling of rebellion. This little girl was none other than the sect leader of the southern Yan Kingdom's divine martial sect, Yan Huainan's daughter, Yan Tingting. Originally, the Yu clan went to the divine martial sect to ask for help. However, when they asked for help, Yan Tingting had already begged her father to let her bring people to Linzhong Commandery to play because she missed Yu Luchuan so much. If Yu Dongxing knew about this, the people from the divine martial sect would arrive in a few days instead of a month. Then, even if Chu Xiu used the great art of extinguishing the heavens, destroying the earth and soul shifting to influence him, he would not have prepared to rebel so easily. It was because of these few days that the Yu clan was annihilated. This could only be said to be fate. Chapter 102. Yan Tingting was quite famous among the younger generation of the northern Yan martial arts world. Of course, this fame wasn't because of her strength, but because of her protective father. Yan Huainan himself was an ambitious and ruthless person. In the past, the divine martial school was just an ordinary school in the south of Yan Kingdom, and it was not qualified to be one of the 7 sects and 8 groups. It was even ridiculed and laughed at by others because the name of the school was Divine Martial School. However, after Yan Huainan took over the divine martial arts sect, he used more than 20 years to increase the influence of the divine martial arts sect by several times, making the divine martial arts sect truly become a top-notch force in the Jianghu and one of the 7 sects and 8 factions. Maybe because Yan Huainan spent most of his time cultivating and working for the sect, he didn't get close to women when he was young. That was why he didn't have any children. When Yan Huainan was more than 50 years old, he finally had a son, Yan Tingting. Of course, Yan Huainan had reached the 3rd level of spirit focus and condensed the true elixir of martial path. He was not old at 50 years old. He was just in his prime. He even looked like he was in his early 40s. Because he had a son in his old age, and it was a daughter, Yan Huainan doted on Yan Tingting from a young age. This made the young lady of the Divine Might sect spoiled and unreasonable. She was even called the Little Witch in the south of Yan Kingdom. No one dared to provoke her. However, it was also because of her willful and rebellious nature that she didn't fancy any of the handsome young men that Yan Huainan introduced to her. Instead, she fell in love with Yu Luchuan, who was good-looking and knew how to win the hearts of girls. Yan Huainan naturally did not approve of this marriage. How could an ambitious and ruthless person like him fall for an embroidered pillow like Yu Luchuan? But he couldn't do anything about his daughter. He couldn't stand being pestered by Yan Tingting, so he had to agree for the time being. At this time, Yan Tingting was happily leading her people up the mountain. She was thinking that when they arrived at the Yu family, she would ask Brother Yu to play around the East Yan Kingdom with her. She was so bored staying in the Divine Might sect. At this time, there was another group of people behind them going up the mountain. It was Nie Donglu and his people from the Righteous Manor. It was common for families to be destroyed in Jianghu. As a big sect in East Yan, the Morgue village would not care about such things. At most, they would just collect some information. However, the relationship between the Yu clan and the Yi Jia manor was not bad. Yu Luchuan had always treated him with respect, so Nie Donglu was embarrassed to turn a blind eye to him. Moreover, after the treasure hunt at LV Yangshan, he fought with Bai Wuji and searched for Chu Xiu with no results. Nie Donglu returned to the morgue for a period of seclusion and successfully broke through to the inner invulnerability realm. This time, he came out to exercise and stabilize his cultivation. Moreover, the news said that this matter was related to the Blue Dragon Society. This attracted the attention of the morgue, so he personally led his men and traveled through the night to the Bailing mansion. The people from the Divine Martial sect looked at Nie Donglio's group cautiously. After realizing that they were from the morgue, they let down their guard a little. The reputation of the morgue was there. It did not matter if the other party was loyal or not. In broad daylight, the morgue would definitely not do anything that would damage their reputation. Moreover, the sect leader of the Divine Martial sect, Yan Huainan, was friends with the morgue village master, Nie Renlong. When Yan Tingting saw Nie Donglu, she raised her eyebrows and said, Nie Donglu, what are you doing here? Yan Tingting did not like Nie Donglu because her father had tried to matchmake her with Nie Donglu. After all, among the young talents of the northern Yan, Nie Donglu was the youngest, but he was the most famous. Yan Huainan admired him a lot. However, Yan Huainan's admiration was useless. Yan Tingting did not like people like Nie Donglu, who had to think 3 times before saying a sentence. She thought that he was too cunning and uninteresting. Nie Donglu felt the same way. He looked down on unruly and willful women like Yan Tingting. With Nie Donglu's methods and strength, when did he need to use marriage to ensure his status? Therefore, he looked down on Yan Tingting even more. Because of this, after sensing Nie Donglu's attitude, Yan Tingting was even more displeased with him. In her mind, only she could look down on him. Since when was it his turn to look down on her? If it was someone else, Yan Tingting would definitely cause trouble for him. However, he was the young master of the Morgue village. Even if she wanted to cause trouble for him, the people from the Divine Martial sect would not play along with her. Although the matter was settled, Yan Tingting still did not like Nie Donglu. Just like now, his words were full of sarcasm. However, Nie Donglu did not show any displeasure on his face. Instead, he asked with a strange expression, "You don't know?" Yan Tingting asked in surprise, "What do I know?" Nie Donglu shook his head. "You'll know when we get to the Biling mansion." As he spoke, Nie Donglu did not stop. He walked up the mountain path. Ridiculous. Yan Tingting snorted coldly and followed behind Nie Donglu with her people. After entering the Biling mansion, the clan masters of the Biling mansion welcomed them at the entrance. They were the ones who reported the news about the Yu clan in great detail. They also knew that Nie Donglu would come personally. "Greetings, young master." Nie Donglu waved his hand and said, "No need for formalities. Let's go to the Yu clan mansion. Are the corpses preserved?" The clan masters quickly nodded and said, "They're all preserved. There's no damage." Yan Tingting, who was behind them, heard their conversation and her expression immediately became unnatural. Yu clan mansion? Corpses? An uneasy feeling suddenly appeared in her heart. Yan Tingting quickly pulled Nie Donglu back and said, "Hey, Nie Donglu. What's going on? Who died in the Yu clan?" Nie Donglu shook his head and said, "You'll know when we get to the Yu clan." As he spoke, Nie Donglu's arm moved slightly and shook off Yan Tingting. He followed the clan masters into the Yu clan mansion. Yan Tingting followed closely behind Nie Donglu with an angry expression. When they arrived at the Yu clan mansion and pushed the door open, a thick stench of blood and stench assaulted their nostrils. For a warrior like Nie Donglu who often killed people, this was nothing. However, for a young mistress like Yan Tingting who grew up in a greenhouse, this stench almost made her vomit. One of the warriors said respectfully, "Young master, the corpses of all the Yu clan's direct descendants are here. Most of them killed each other. Yu Henian and the others were killed by the Blue Dragon Society's assassins. I've already preserved the corpses separately." Nie Donglu nodded. Yan Tingting's expression suddenly changed. She rushed over and grabbed the warrior's collar. Her eyes were red as she shouted, "What did you say? All the Yu clan's direct descendants are dead? Where's brother Yu? Where's Yu Luchuan?" That warrior was still a clan master of a small clan. Now that his collar was being grabbed by a little girl, he also showed an angry expression. However, at this time, Nie Donglu said indifferently, "She's the daughter of the Divine Martial sects Yan Huainan, Yan Tingting." Hearing this, the warrior's expression immediately collapsed. He said carefully, "The Yu clan's people are all dead. Yu Luchuan was also beheaded. However, we've already made an ice coffin and preserved it." Hearing this, Yan Tingting immediately felt as if she was struck by lightning. She stood there dumbfounded, her eyes instantly turning red as big tears rolled down her cheeks. The two elders beside her who were in charge of taking care of her were anxious, but there was nothing they could do. With this young mistress's temper, they didn't even dare to coax her. Impossible. Impossible. You must be lying to me. Yan Tingting roared at the warrior. The warrior said helplessly, Miss Yan, we really wouldn't dare to lie to you. Yu Luchuan's ice coffin is over there. There are people in charge of changing the ice coffin every day to ensure that the body is intact. Yan Tingting walked into the courtyard and saw the ice coffin containing Yu Luchuan's body. She immediately laid on top of it and wailed loudly. Nie Donglu, who was standing at the side, raised his eyebrows. That trash Yu Luchuan actually made this unruly girl fall in love with him? This was really not easy. This girl was not a good person. She had turned the south of Yen upside down. Countless people had died because of her. How did Yu Luchuan hook up with her? However, Nie Donglu didn't think too much about it. He wasn't interested in these methods of pleasing women. He just said to a warrior in his 40s beside him in a deep voice, Uncle Ping, please check the bodies. If there are no problems, we will leave after offering our condolences. Nie Donglu only brought people to check the situation because it was related to the Blue Dragon Society. Otherwise, he would only be here to pay his respects. The middle-aged man walked over and checked one by one. Suddenly, he came over and said, Young master, I discovered something. The knife marks left by the Blue Dragon Society assassin are exactly the same as the ones left by the Chu Xiu during the pursuit of Chu Xiu. Nie Donglu was shocked. He hurriedly said, Uncle Ping, are you sure that the killer was Chu Xiu? This Uncle Ping in front of him was a member of the Memorial Village. Although he was only at the Xiantian realm, his master was an inspector of the Guanzhong torture room. He was best at deducing the opponent's strength, weapons, martial arts, and even habits from all kinds of marks. Although this Uncle Ping's strength was average, he was already 80% as good as his master in this aspect. Chapter 103. Faced with Nie Donglio's questioning, Uncle Ping only shook his head and said, Young master, you misunderstood me. I only said that the saber marks were the same as the ones left by Chu Xiu. However, I don't mean that the killer was definitely Chu Xiu. It could be someone else who used Chu Xiu's saber to kill them. Nie Donglu said in a deep voice, Are you sure that the weapon used to kill these Yu clan people is the same saber Chu Xiu used in the past? Uncle Ping's face revealed a hint of pride as he said, Young master, you might not know this, but in the eyes of most warriors, the scars on the wounds don't reveal much. However, for people like us who are proficient in this field, we can see a lot of information from them. The weapon Chu Xiu used was a 4th revolution to 6th revolution precious weapon. Weapons of this level cannot be mass-produced. They must be personally forged by a master blacksmith before they can be named. It is an existence that cannot be replicated. Even if the same master blacksmith used the same materials and the same method to forge 2 identical precious weapons, in reality, there would still be some subtle differences. Therefore, I am 100% sure that this saber is Chu Xiu's saber. However, as for the person, I am not so sure. This is because I saw the strange grappling hand that Chu Xiu used on these corpses, as well as his own evil saber technique. However, most of the corpses were demonic martial arts. Moreover, the person who killed them was not an innate, but an internal invulnerability expert. Therefore, from the looks of it, it could be Chu Xiu's senior or someone related to him who used his weapon to kill them. This is also possible. Nie Donglio's eyes revealed a strange look. Since Uncle Ping had already said this, Nie Donglu could be sure that the killer was Chu Xiu. He had investigated Chu Xiu's information. He did not have a master, and when he fought for the secret box, he was already at the peak of the innate stage. It was normal for him to have stepped into the internal invulnerability stage. However, for some reason, Chu Xiu had actually joined the Blue Dragon Society. This made Nie Donglu feel a little troubled. After thinking about it, Nie Donglu said to Uncle Ping, "Uncle Ping, take some people to Linzhong Commandery later and tell them that Chu Xiu is no longer wanted. Whether they want to pursue Chu Xiu is up to them. In any case, Chu Xiu Manor won't do anything anymore." Hearing this, Uncle Ping was stunned. "Young master, the Blue Dragon Society only has one Sky Sin branch in the east of Yan province. There's no need to be so afraid of them, right? Chu Xiu is just an ordinary killer of the Blue Dragon Society." Nie Donglu shook his head and said, "He wiped out an entire clan single-handedly. From now on, Chu Xiu is no ordinary assassin. Moreover, I'm not afraid of the Sky Sin branch, but the entire Blue Dragon Society. There are some things you don't understand. 3 years ago, the Blue Dragon Society Sky Sin branch was wiped out. Even I don't know much about some of the secrets involved. However, even if you think about it in the dumbest way, you can figure it out. The Blue Dragon Society only has 36 Big Dipper branches, but one of them was killed in one night. Isn't this a big deal?" After that, the head of the Blue Dragon Society, the Crescent Green Dragon, Bu Tiannan, who was ranked 9th on the Wind and Cloud list, personally went to the Northern Yen. That battle involved many powerful forces in the Northern Yen, such as the Floating Snow City of the Extreme North, the Divine Martial Gate of the South of Yen Province, the Huangfu clan of the Pingyao of the Yen Province, and even the Great Brightness Temple of the Northern Buddhist sect. After that battle, the Blue Dragon Society didn't make any moves. They only sent a new branch leader to the Northern Yen. However, the other powerful forces also turned a blind eye to the Blue Dragon Society's actions. They even warned their disciples that as long as the Blue Dragon Society doesn't provoke them, they shouldn't provoke the Blue Dragon Society. Nie Donglu looked at Uncle Ping and said, "At that time, my mortuary village did not get involved. My father also told me to do so. The conflict between the Green Dragon Group, one of the 4 spirits, and the big sects of the Northern Yen Kingdom is not something we can speculate about. No matter who wins or loses that battle, it is obvious that the matter is over. The Blue Dragon Society just sent a branch leader. Clearly, the powerful forces in the Northern Yen may have made an agreement with the Blue Dragon Society, or they tacitly agreed to it, but now they don't want to have any conflict with the Blue Dragon Society. Otherwise, the rumor that the head of the Blue Dragon Society is temperamental might come to the Northern Yen again. Chu Xiu was lucky to be able to join the Blue Dragon Society this time. I'll let him go for now." In fact, ever since Chu Xiu escaped their pursuit last time, Nie Donglu knew he wouldn't be able to catch him. Now that Chu Xiu had joined the Blue Dragon Society, it was even more troublesome. Chu Xiu wasn't important, but his identity as a member of the Blue Dragon Society and the sensitivity of the Heavenly Sin branch. For the sake of the big picture, they had to put aside the matter of hunting down Chu Xiu for now. However, at this time, Yan Tingting's side had completely collapsed. She began to curse at the Blue Dragon Society, saying that she would bring the Gate of God's Might to destroy the Blue Dragon Society. However, she was stopped by 2 experts from the Gate of God's Might. Back then, the Gate of God's Might had also interfered in the matters of the Blue Dragon Society. Naturally, they knew the inside story. If they went to find trouble with the Blue Dragon Society, it would be the Gate of God's Might that would fight to the death with the Blue Dragon Society. If the people of the Blue Dragon Society touched Yan Tingting, then it would be fine. However, the other party was an assassin organization. They only killed a piece of trash that had no status with Yan Tingting. If they provoked the Blue Dragon Society because of this piece of trash, then the Gate of God's Might would really be an idiot. In fact, if Yan Huainan knew about this matter, he might even thank the people of the Blue Dragon Society for helping. After all, he didn't like Yu Luchuan for a long time. However, he was afraid that his daughter would hate him, so he didn't do anything to separate them. Now that someone helped him, he couldn't ask for more. A strange light flickered in Nie Donglio's eyes as he walked over. The dead can't be brought back to life. Tingting, please restrain your grief and go get your revenge on the Azure Dragon Society. I advise you to put that thought to rest. Yan Tingting glared at Nie Donglu. Are you here to make fun of me? Nie Dong wore a helpless expression and said, I was a good friend of Brother Yu. Wouldn't I be sad that he's dead? I've also guessed the identity of the assassin from the Blue Dragon Society who killed Brother Yu. It's Chu Xiu, the one who stole the secret box from me. That's why I have a grudge against him. However, now that Chu Xiu has joined the Blue Dragon Society, especially the Heavenly Sin branch, whose identity is extremely sensitive, I don't dare to make a move recklessly. I can only revoke the warrant. Regarding the Azure Dragon Society, your House of Divine Might should know a lot more than I do, so you don't have to think too much about it. Gate Master Yen might let you do as you please in other areas, but he won't allow you to mess around in this kind of thing. Alright, I'll cut to the chase. I was planning to settle Brother Yu's funeral, but since you're here, I'll leave it to you. After saying this, Nie Donglu left straight away. He knew Yan Huainan wouldn't let Yan Tingting act recklessly, at least not for now. He told Yan Tingting everything just to plant a thorn in her heart. The identity of the Blue Dragon Society could protect Chu Xiu for a while, but it couldn't protect him forever. Meanwhile, Yan Tingting's face was filled with hatred as she mumbled the name Chu Xiu. A few days later, the news of the Yu clan's annihilation spread throughout the Linzhong commandery. Even the entire East Yen heard some news. After all, the Yu clan was not an ordinary, small aristocratic family. After it was annihilated, it caused a huge commotion. Especially after Nie Donglu confirmed that the killer was a new member of the Blue Dragon Society, Chu Xiu. The killer was only an inner Aura Realm warrior, which was very shocking. Moreover, because the Yu clan still had some surviving henchmen and stewards, they told the details of the Yu clan's annihilation in detail. Hearing these details, some people couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. Ordinary killers used knives to kill, but Chu Xiu from the Blue Dragon Society's Heavenly Sin branch used people's hearts. The people of the Yu clan had died in Chu Xiu's hands, and had also died in their hearts. Among the thousands of Yu clan's warriors, less than 1/10 of them died in Chu Xiu's hands. Most of them died in the hands of their own people. Even when they died, they were confused and didn't know why they died. Some of the martial artists in the east of Yan dynasty gave Chu Xiu a nickname for such a terrifying and strange technique. He was called Blood Demon. His methods were as cruel as a demon, and blood flowed like a river. Blood Demon, Chu Xiu. Before Chu Xiu returned to the Blue Dragon Society, his nickname, Blood Demon, had already spread to the East Yen Jianghu, and even to the Northern Yen branch of Wind Sweeping Building. Chapter 104. The headquarters of Wind Sweeping Tower was located in the most prosperous region of Eastern Qi, but they had branches in West Chu and Northern Yen. They were located in the capital cities of Northern Yen and West Chu, and they were responsible for the affairs of these two countries. The leader of the Northern Yen branch, Three-Eyed God, Qi Yuanli, was in his 50s. He had a square face and wore a brocade robe, but he had a lazy aura. His favorite activity was to hold the purple clay teapot that he had kept for more than 30 years, basking in the sun while reading the reports from the various Northern Yen regions. He was like an old man in his twilight years. There was a thin red mark on Qi Yuanli's forehead that looked like a third eye. This was also the reason why he was nicknamed Three-Eyed God. It meant that he could observe the movements of the martial world with his third eye. But in fact, the mark on Qi Yuanli's forehead was left behind by a powerful finger force when he was fighting with someone in his early years. Although he managed to kill his opponent in that battle, his opponent's finger force had almost caused his head to explode and his skull to almost shatter. The Jianghu divine doctor who saved Qi Yuanli later said that it was really inconceivable that Qi Yuanli was able to survive such an injury. It was also because of that time that Qi Yuanli always said that he was a person who had died once. He could feel the feeling of death, so now his favorite thing was to bask in the sun. Only the warm temperature of the sun could make him feel that he was still alive and a living person. Just as Qi Yuanli was squinting and leisurely basking in the sun, a cultivator in his 30s walked over and cupped his hands. "Tower Lord, the Linzhong County branch has sent a message that requires your personal approval." Qi Yuanli took the report and casually waved his hand. "How many times have I told you? I'm just the deputy leader. The real leader isn't here. Don't talk nonsense." The martial artist from Wind Sweeping Tower only smiled and did not reply. There were no idiots in the anemophilia business. They were all smart people. Was the deputy leader not the leader? If he really called him the deputy leader, it would probably be even more irritating to Qi Yuanli. Qi Yuanli took the report and flipped through it. He softly said, "The Linzhong County branch is actually recommending a martial artist from the martial world to enter the Longhu leaderboard. It's really interesting." The Wind Sweeping Tower's Dragon and Tiger ranking was only prepared for a few of the young elites of the pugilistic world. Because of the lack of resources, 70% of the martial artists on the Dragon and Tiger ranking were from large sects and aristocratic families. Only those martial artists who were born into a good family and had a solid foundation would be able to stand out in their youth and make a name for themselves. It was extremely difficult for martial artists who were born in the wilderness to stand out. The person recommended by the Forested Commandery's Wind Sweeping Pavilion branch was none other than Chu Xiu. Even with Qi Yuanli's experience, he couldn't help but sigh when he saw Chu Xiu's series of astonishing achievements. It had been a long time since he had seen such a fierce young man. Especially the battle where Chu Xiu used his identity as a member of the Blue Dragon Society to destroy the Yu clan, it was even more stunning. He made use of the Yu clan's weakness in their hearts and finally defeated them. The Northern Yen pugilistic world actually produced such a stunning young man. It's not bad, but it's a pity. Who knows if he will still be able to stand at the top of the pugilistic world after 20 years and enter the Dragon and Tiger ranking. Qi Yuanli's sigh wasn't because he looked down on Chu Xiu. It was because the Wind Sweeping Pavilion had calculated the number of young elites on the Dragon and Tiger ranking. Every generation of the Dragon and Tiger ranking would last for 20 years, but in reality, it would only last for 10 years. In these 10 years, these young elites would either die prematurely, become influential figures who could stir up the pugilistic world, or be pushed down by the newcomers. There was almost no one who could stay on the Dragon and Tiger ranking for 20 years. There were only 100 people on the Dragon and Tiger ranking in every generation, and among these 100 people, the death rate was as high as 40%. This was an extremely horrifying number. Every generation of young martial artists would die. However, the Longhu list was like a tall tree that attracted the wind. They were the ones who died the fastest. Among those who died prematurely, those who were born in the large sects were still fine. After all, they had the protection of their backers. The ones who had the highest death rate were people like Chu Xiu, who was born in the wilderness. Of course, although Chu Xiu was born in the wilderness, he had now joined the Blue Dragon Society, so he could be considered to have the support of the Blue Dragon Society. Otherwise, Nie Donglu would not have withdrawn his wanted order. Moreover, the information said that the daughter of the Divine Martial sect leader, Yan Tingting, was still clamoring about killing her way to the Blue Dragon Society's branch and killing Chu Xiu. In the end, she was confined by her father. The warrior from the Wind Sweeping Pavilion beside him said, "Leader, according to this Chu Xiu's achievements, he is definitely qualified to be on the Dragon and Tiger ranking. The only thing we need to determine now is what his ranking should be." Qi Yuanli asked back, "What do you think it should be?" The warrior said directly, "Chu Xiu has already stepped into the internal aura realm, and he even destroyed the Yu clan by himself. With this kind of strength and achievements, it is enough for him to be in the top 10. Qi Yuanli shook his head and said, it is enough for him to be in the top 10, but he should not be in the top 10. The warrior was puzzled and asked, why? When Nie Donglu first entered the ranking, he was in the top 20. After the battle of the 18 Black Cloud strongholds, he was in the top 10. Now, Chu Xiu's achievements may not be any less than Nie Dongliu's. Logically speaking, he should also be in the top 10. Qi Yuanli patted the cultivator's shoulder and said, "The Dragon Tiger Sovereign List. Our wind-sweeping pavilion naturally wants to be absolutely fair. Unfortunately, this is the way of the world. There are some things that cannot be taken too seriously. When our wind-sweeping pavilion first established a branch in the northern Yen, the righteous manor helped us a lot. This is a favor that we need to repay." This Chu Xiu's influence was indeed big enough, but in terms of influence, it was only around the eastern Yen region. It did not even affect the northern Yen region, let alone the entire Jianghu. Moreover, the influence that Nie Donglu had caused shook the entire Jianghu. In fact, the overall strength of the 18 Black Cloud strongholds was not as strong as the Yu clan. The reason why he could obtain such a reputation was because he was the young master of the righteous manor. "Shaolin, you are one of the people I have high hopes for. In the field of anemophilia, it is not easy. We know too many things, and there are even more taboos. Hence, even if you know some things, you have to keep it to yourself and not say it for the rest of your life. In this Jianghu, there is no such thing as fairness. What our wind-sweeping pavilion can do is to be as fair as possible. This Chu Xiu's ranking cannot be in the top 10. He can only be in the top 20. Let him be in the 18th place." Shaolin said hesitantly, "But the 18th place is by Wuji from the northern floating snow city. Wouldn't that push by Wuji down by one place?" Qi Yuanli said indifferently, "Those barbarians from Driftsnow City are too arrogant and despotic. Last month, the people from my wind-sweeping pavilion went to Driftsnow City's territory to search for information, but they were beaten back." Shaolin's expression turned serious and he quickly nodded. At the same time, he thought to himself that even a small ranking list had to consider the other party's background and relationship with the wind-sweeping pavilion. As expected, the field of anemophilia was not easy. After getting Qi Yuanli's confirmation, Shaolin used a secret method to send a message to the headquarters of Eastern Qi's wind-sweeping pavilion and West Chu. When they replied, the three parties would change the ranking list together. The wind-sweeping pavilion's Dragon and Tiger Storm Supreme ranking was actually 3 huge stones erected in front of the headquarters and 2 branches of the wind-sweeping pavilion. The Supreme ranking was made from the azure glass stone, which was found in a meteorite. It was something that could only be found by chance. The Supreme ranking was made from the best material for forging weapons, the Golden Light Stone. It was extremely bright and looked like gold, but it was more precious than gold. As for the Dragon and Tiger ranking, it was slightly worse. It was made from ordinary azure jade, but its quality was not bad. After the news was confirmed, the 3 parties erased the words on the giant stones at the same time and replaced them with new names. In front of the wind-sweeping pavilion, countless anemophilia affiliated with the wind-sweeping pavilion and some wandering martial artists were watching as the disciples of the wind-sweeping pavilion changed the ranking list. Compared to the Dragon and Tiger ranking that rarely changed, the changes on the Dragon and Tiger ranking were much bigger. There were even cases where the Dragon and Tiger ranking was changed twice in a day. This time, it did not attract too much attention. Most of the people were just there to watch the show. Some people even opened bets, betting on whose ranking would change this time, or if there would be a new person on the list. After the changes were completed, everyone could not help but be surprised when they saw the results of the new person on the list. It was his first time on the list and he was already in the top 20. This was quite impressive. Name, Chu Xiu. Nickname, Blood Demon. Rank, 18th affiliation, Blue Dragon Society's Heavenly Sin Branch. Weapon, Artifact Thin Saber. Martial arts, saber techniques are sharp and strange. His inner breath is deep. At the same time, he is skilled in grappling. He is suspected to have inherited part of the martial arts of the ancient demonic path expert, Heavenly Demon Lord. Battle record: annihilated the Zhang family of the Mountain Sun Prefecture. Killed Zhang Baitao, an inner disciple of the Ba Mountain Sword sect, and 4 other innate rankers in Luyang town. Annihilated the Black Tiger Gang and 3 other factions in the Cold River Prefecture. Killed nearly 10 innate rankers. When the Heavenly Demon Lord's relic appeared in Luyang Mountain, he fought fiercely with Nie Donglu of the Morale village and obtained the treasure. In the Bailing Prefecture, he incited internal strife in the Yu family. In one battle, thousands of Yu family members died, and all the direct descendants were slaughtered. Chapter 105. Chu Xiu's achievements on the Longhu leaderboard weren't that great. Some of the elites who had been on the leaderboard for years had more achievements than Chu Xiu. The reason why everyone was shocked was because of the people Chu Xiu killed when he was on the Longhu leaderboard. Looking at other people's achievements on the leaderboard, most of them competed with this person, won this person, competed with that person, won that person, and so on. Some of them killed people, but most of them killed evil cultivators. Actually, there weren't that many people killed. Looking at Chu Xiu's achievements, almost every one of them was achieved by killing people. Even without looking at the person himself, just by looking at his achievements, they knew that he was definitely a cruel and ruthless person. What made them even more afraid was Chu Xiu's identity. He was actually a warrior of the Blue Dragon Society. Actually, the assassins of the Blue Dragon Society didn't have to hide their names and keep a low profile. As one of the 4 spirits and the largest assassin organization in the world, the Blue Dragon Society didn't need to keep a low profile anymore. On the contrary, assassins also needed fame. Otherwise, who would hire a nameless assassin to kill someone? Therefore, over the years, many assassins of the Blue Dragon Society had been on the leaderboard. Now, the great dragon head of the Blue Dragon Society, Crescent Green Dragon, Butian Nan, was still on the leaderboard. However, there were very few warriors in the Blue Dragon Society who were on the leaderboard. The reason was very simple. The profession of an assassin was really about killing people. Those who could make a name for themselves and kill a lot were mostly veteran assassins. By the time they got on the leaderboard, they had already broken the rules of the leaderboard. There were also some who were lucky enough to get on the leaderboard, but as an assassin with a high mortality rate, the possibility of dying was very high. Therefore, no one from the Blue Dragon Society had been on the leaderboard for at least 10 years. This was the first time. Originally, when Chu Xiu destroyed the Yu clan, his name was only known in the east of Yan Kingdom. However, as Wind Sweeping Tower listed him on the Longhu leaderboard, Chu Xiu's name became very familiar in the Jianghu. Of course, only the people from the northern Yan country would remember him. Not long after Wind Sweeping Tower announced the news, Chu Xiu returned to the Blue Dragon Society branch in Mount Tai County. As soon as he entered the branch, the martial artists in the branch saw Chu Xiu return. They were stunned for a moment before they bowed to Chu Xiu and said, "Sir." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and nodded. The attitude of this group of people changed really fast. Before, they were still indifferent, but now they were adults. In the square in the center of the branch, the Ghost Hand King and the other assassins from the Blue Dragon Society were all there. They looked at Chu Xiu with a strange expression. When Chu Xiu accepted this mission, no one thought that Chu Xiu could complete it. Everyone thought that Chu Xiu would fail in Bailing Mansion and return to the Blue Dragon Society to accept other low-level missions. However, who would have thought that Chu Xiu would really succeed and cause such a big commotion? The Ghost Hand King walked over and cupped his hands. "Brother Chu, congratulations. To be able to become a rank 5 assassin with the strength of an internal invulnerability stage. Let alone the Heavenly Sin branch, even in the entire Blue Dragon Society, there are only a few of them." Chu Xiu was surprised. "You guys know that I've completed the mission?" The Ghost Hand King smiled bitterly. The Blue Dragon Society has their own intelligence. Besides, the commotion you caused was too big. We didn't even need to investigate to know about it. You're very famous now. After destroying the Yu clan, you're ranked 18th on the Longhu leaderboard by Wind-Sweeping Tower. The people of the martial world even gave you a nickname, Blood Demon. This is great. You don't have to think about your nickname in the Blue Dragon Society anymore. You can just use your nickname. At this point, the Ghost Hand King shook his head and said, compared to you, Brother Chu, we're really old. There's a rumor in the Blue Dragon Society that the fastest way to kill is not with martial arts. I've never understood what it means, but now I know. As the news of the Yu clan spread, the Ghost Hand King and the others were shocked. Chu Xiu's methods were very different from the way they killed people in the past. They only killed people, but Chu Xiu killed people's hearts. With this series of methods, the Yu clan was directly destroyed. If it were them, even if Yan Bugui and Tangya, who were the strongest among them, joined hands, they might not be able to complete such a difficult mission. Maybe they could kill Yu Henian or Yu Luchuan, but they couldn't kill as many people as Chu Xiu. When Chu Xiu heard this news, he frowned slightly. The intelligence of Wind-Sweeping Tower was a little too good. He had just joined the Blue Dragon Society, and Wind-Sweeping Tower had already dug out his identity. To be honest, Chu Xiu didn't care much about this list. It was like a tall tree attracting the wind. But now that his identity had been exposed, it didn't matter anymore. If the Blue Dragon Society could protect him, he would temporarily stay in the Blue Dragon Society. If the Blue Dragon Society couldn't protect him, Chu Xiu would find another way out. At this time, the fire slave walked over and cupped his hands towards Chu Xiu. I have offended Brother Chu before, please forgive me. For others, they would be embarrassed to apologize after mocking the other party. But for the fire slave, it was not a problem at all. He was born in the western region. There were many small countries in that place, and they fought with each other all year round. There was only one truth, and that was, the strong were respected. The strength that Chu Xiu displayed was stronger than his. Not to mention that he bowed his head now, even if Chu Xiu mocked him a few more times, he would still welcome him with a smile. Unlike other warriors, the fire slave had no such thing as dignity. Before he joined the Blue Dragon Society, he was just a slave of a tribe in the western region. Because that tribe had the word fire in their name, he was called the fire slave. To him, it was normal to apologize to the strong. There was nothing shameful about it. How could he eat something like dignity? Chu Xiu casually waved his hand and said, it's just a small matter. There's no need to be like this. On the other side, the Wolf King with a wolf's head painted on his mask was a man in his 30s. He had a rough appearance and looked very forthright. He walked over and cupped his hands towards Chu Xiu, saying, Wolf King Xiu Ming, please give me some pointers, Brother Chu. Well said. Chu Xiu also cupped his hands in return. The broken sword, Yan Bugui, who was called the strongest in the Heavenly Sin Division by the Ghost Hand King, also nodded at Chu Xiu without saying anything. However, in the eyes of the others, this was already considered normal. This person's personality was so unsociable and cold. It was already not easy for him to be willing to talk to you. Tangya, who had not spoken since the beginning, was the youngest among them. He seemed to be only a few years older than Chu Xiu. His face was delicate and pretty. At first glance, he did not look like an assassin. Instead, he had the temperament of a noble family's young master. When everyone had finished speaking, he walked to Chu Xiu's side and suddenly asked, actually, I've always been curious about one thing. If the Yu clan's third brother did not agree to your plan to force him to abdicate, what would you do? Chu Xiu said indifferently, the Yu clan's ninth branch, there are too many people with different intentions. I chose the Yu clan's third brother only because he has the biggest flaw in his heart. Moreover, I can be sure that even if I did not choose the Yu clan's third brother, as long as I could incite one person to attack Yu Henian, the Yu clan's third brother would definitely not stand idly by. The human heart is always the hardest thing to control. If they have no flaws in their hearts, my plan would also not succeed. Tangya was stunned for a moment, then suddenly laughed and said, "You're right. The human heart is indeed hard to control. It's even harder than martial arts." Chu Xiu glanced at Tangya. The Ghost Hand King was right. This Tangya's temper was a little strange and he seemed to be a little neurotic. However, their performance today also proved that within the Blue Dragon Society, only strength was the proof of status. Before Chu Xiu revealed his strength, people like Yan Bugui and Tangya did not even have the interest to talk to him. Now that he had completed a level 5 mission with the strength of an internal aura realm, he had completed a mission that they could not complete. Even the most eccentric and cold Yan Bugui took the initiative to greet Chu Xiu. At this moment, the Sky Crime Branch leader had just returned to the headquarters. Seeing that Chu Xiu had returned, he walked over and patted Chu Xiu's shoulder, praising him, "You did a good job in this mission. It can be considered that you have made our Blue Dragon Society proud. After you receive your mission reward, take 3 Azure Dragon Spirit Pills as an additional reward." After praising Chu Xiu, the Sky Crime Branch leader looked at Yan Bugui and the others with a gloomy gaze. "What are you all still doing here? Are you all very free? There are so many missions piled up. Why aren't you all doing them? Are you all waiting for me to do them?" Fire Slave shrugged his shoulders and did not dare to reply. He immediately ran off to choose his mission, and the others did the same. As for those killers without a code name, they waited for the Sky Crime Branch leader's figure to disappear before walking over to congratulate Chu Xiu. They greeted him as Lord and then obediently went off to choose their mission. Chu Xiu turned his head and asked Ghost Hand King, "Has Lord Branch leader been in a bad mood recently?" Ghost Hand King said in a low voice, "Lord Branch leader's mood is not only bad now. It can be said that he has never been in a good mood. I've told you about our Heavenly Sin branch. 3 years ago, we were almost completely wiped out. In the end, the headquarters actually only sent Lord Branch Lord to rebuild the Heavenly Sin branch. This is a tough job, and you know the inside story." Chu Xiu nodded. Of course, he knew. If the Blue Dragon Society headquarters wanted people and resources, they would give them to the Sky Crime Branch leader and let him rebuild the Sky Crime Branch. That would be called receiving orders in the face of danger. But now, they only sent a lone commander. What was this called? It was called exile. Either the Sky Crime Branch leader had offended someone at the Blue Dragon Society headquarters, or he had been sent here because he had failed in a fight. Ghost Hand King chuckled and said, "It's good that you understand. Lord Branch leader is also very sullen now. He is a great expert at the one with the world realm, but he is always carrying out level 5 or even level 4 missions. He feels ashamed." Chapter 106. There were some secrets about the Heavenly Sin branch that weren't in the original story. Of course, Chu Xiu might have forgotten about it himself. However, since he knew that this branch lord wasn't in a good mood, Chu Xiu naturally wouldn't go and provoke him. Chu Xiu nodded. Then, he turned to Ghost Hand King and asked, "Oh, right. Those assassins just now all called me milord. Is there any other position in the Azure Dragon Association other than the leader?" The Ghost Hand King shook his head and said, "Don't worry about it. That's just a title. These people are used to currying favor with rank 4 and rank 5 assassins like us. Before you became a rank 5 assassin, they didn't care, but now that you are, of course, they have to be polite to you. Otherwise, they might lose their lives. Some of our Blue Dragon Society's missions are group missions. For example, the mission you received to exterminate the Yu clan. Other than an abnormal person like you, who can complete it alone, no one else can do it. That's why we need to send a large number of people to exterminate the clan. We, the experts, are in charge of cleaning up the opponent's experts, and these low-level assassins will cooperate with us. When carrying out the mission, they naturally have to listen to our commands. So during the mission, if they offend us, we will send them to the most dangerous place. If they disobey, they will break the rules. When they return to the Blue Dragon Society, they will be severely punished. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. This kind of thing shouldn't be said openly. However, the Ghost Hand King didn't avoid it at all. Obviously, this kind of thing had become an unspoken rule. Actually, this kind of thing wasn't a good thing. Although class oppression existed everywhere, the Blue Dragon Society's actions were a bit too obvious. The unspoken rule had already become a problem. Of course, this was also related to the fact that the Blue Dragon Society was everywhere. No one in the Blue Dragon Society's headquarters would dare to do this. However, Chu Xiu didn't care. He was just an ordinary assassin in the Blue Dragon Society. At most, his rank was higher. He wasn't a branch lord, so this kind of thing wasn't something he should care about. After following the Ghost Hand King to get his own elixir and mission reward, Chu Xiu directly returned to the house and went into seclusion. In fact, this was also the norm for assassins in the Blue Dragon Society. They often walked the line between life and death. They either killed people or went into seclusion. Killing people was to earn cultivation resources. After earning cultivation resources, they could increase their strength and then kill even stronger people to earn even more cultivation resources. This was the daily life of most Blue Dragon Society assassins. Amidst the calmness, there was blood and killing. In the end, there were only two outcomes. The first was to become a great expert like the Heavenly Sin branch leader, or to control a region, or to directly enter the Blue Dragon Society's headquarters to cultivate. The other one was naturally killed in the process of carrying out a mission. Advancing from the inner invulnerability stage to the outer invulnerability stage was a painstaking process. Even with the Azure Dragon spiritual pill and the cultivation resources rewarded for completing the mission, he still had a long way to go before reaching the outer invulnerability stage. Half a month later, Chu Xiu had already refined all these things. It just so happened that he was ready to go out and do a few missions. While earning rewards, he could also hone his martial arts techniques. This time, Chu Xiu didn't choose those level 5 missions that were too difficult. Instead, he chose ordinary level 4 missions. Back then, Chu Xiu chose the Yu family as his target because he had a grudge against the Yu family. Another reason was that he wanted to establish his position in the Blue Dragon Society. Actually, a mission like the Yu family's wasn't worth it for Chu Xiu. This was because there were too many restrictions and it took too much time. For example, it would be very difficult for Chu Xiu to kill a physical invulnerability stage expert alone. Back then, Chu Xiu could kill Yu Henian because he had already been poisoned and seriously injured. If the other party was alone, it would make Chu Xiu feel that he couldn't kill him. At present, Chu Xiu didn't have the strength to fight against a physical invulnerability stage expert face to face without any tricks. Therefore, instead of wasting time and energy to carry out this kind of level 5 mission, it would be more practical to carry out a level 4 mission and kill some ordinary inner invulnerability stage martial artists. One reason was that Chu Xiu was confident, and the other was that he was fast. Moreover, as the ranking list of young masters spread in Jianghu, some people who came to the Blue Dragon Society to kill people even directly asked Chu Xiu to do it. Killers also needed fame. Before Chu Xiu became famous, only those who were familiar with the Blue Dragon Society in East Yen knew that Cruel Sword and Tangya were the two strongest killers in the Heavenly Sin branch. Therefore, they were asked to do it by name. Now that the Longhu list was out, the person was changed to Chu Xiu. Of course, to ask a killer to carry out a mission by name, the prerequisite was that the price was enough and the killer agreed. The Blue Dragon Society was an assassin organization. With enough money, everything could be negotiated. Even if you wanted your enemy to be dismembered, the Blue Dragon Society could satisfy you. But if you made so many requests without money, you were purely looking for trouble. The temper of the killers in the Blue Dragon Society wasn't that good. 3 months later, in a small tavern on the official road of the Qingyang Mansion in Mount Tai County, a stout fat man sat there. There was a lot of wine and dishes in front of the table, but strangely, he didn't touch them. Instead, he kept wiping the cold sweat on his head, looking extremely nervous. The Jianghu people passing by looked at him strangely, but immediately stared back. His aura was extremely sharp. This seemingly strange fat man was actually an inner invulnerability stage martial artist. But this was even more strange. Why was an inner invulnerability stage martial artist sitting here and so nervous? At this time, someone seemed to have recognized his identity and secretly muttered, "Isn't this the Fugue gang's leader, Fatty Yu? His gang is called the Fugue gang, but it's very stingy. It's to the point that several martial arts factions around the Qingyang Manor are unwilling to deal with him." However, it was said that Fatty Yu had been doing very well recently. His rich and noble gang had been very generous this time. They had spent a lot of money to instigate a rival gang, the Iron Peak gang's vice gang leader, and completely annihilated them. Shouldn't he be counting money in the Fugue gang now? What was he doing here? At this time, a Xiantian lord dressed in a short white robe and carrying 2 fans on his back hurriedly walked into the small wine shop. Seeing the martial artist, Fatty Yu quickly pulled him and asked, "How's the situation? Did you get the information?" The martial artist took out a fan and looked at the people around him. Seeing that Fatty Yu was so anxious that he didn't hide anything, he didn't bother to say more. He fanned himself and said, "Leader Yu, I've gotten the information. I advise you not to return to the Qingyang Mansion now. Just run for your life along the official road. Of course, if you have a physical invulnerability stage backing you, you can also choose to rely on them." Fatty Yu's expression changed and he quickly said, "What do you mean?" The martial artist said indifferently, "Of course it's for your own good." For the sake of his son entering the divine martial sect, the leader of the Iron Peak Hall had long prepared a large amount of precious treasures and resources as a greeting gift to the divine martial sect. The matter of destroying the Iron Peak Hall was done by you, Leader Yu. You didn't follow the rules of the Jianghu. The leader of the Iron Peak Hall had already admitted defeat and was even willing to cripple his own martial arts in exchange for his life. He even ordered the Iron Peak Hall to stop resisting, yet you still ruthlessly killed him. Don't blame his son for giving up the opportunity to enter the divine martial sect just to hire an assassin from the Blue Dragon Society to kill you. Moreover, the information has already been confirmed. Not only did he hire an assassin from the Blue Dragon Society, but he also paid a huge price to hire one of the gold medal assassins of the Heavenly Sin Branch, Blood Demon, Chu Xiu, to kill you. That person might have only joined the Heavenly Sin Branch a few months ago, but he's the most famous one. In less than a month, he destroyed the Yu clan of the Biling Mountain. After that, he only carried out a few missions, but all of them were one-hit kills. Those who died were no weaker than you, Chief Yu. That's why I'm advising you to run now. I think the assassin should be in the Qingyang Manor by now." Hearing this, Fatty Yu regretted it very much. He didn't know that the leader of the Iron Peak Hall had actually left the most precious treasures and resources of the Iron Peak Hall to his son. When he killed the Iron Peak Hall, it was only for a moment of pleasure. After all, the Iron Peak Hall had always been causing trouble for him. Fatty Yu had wanted to kill him for a long time. Now that he knew that he was being targeted by an assassin from the Blue Dragon Society, and that it was the infamous Blood Demon, Chu Xiu in the East Yen province, he felt a chill in his heart. Therefore, after hearing this, he immediately turned around to leave. However, he was stopped by the warrior behind him. "Leader Yu, you've only paid the down payment. You haven't paid the rest yet. Our wind-sweeping tower's money isn't so easily owed. Otherwise, before the blood demon finds you, I'll throw your position out and show others," the warrior from wind-sweeping tower sneered. Fatty Yu cursed in his heart. In a hurry, he threw out a fist-sized piece of purple gold and turned around to leave. However, he didn't follow the wind-sweeping tower's advice and run for his life. Instead, he prepared to return to the Azure Sun Manor to collect some of the sect's resources and valuables. Those were his life savings, so Fatty Yu couldn't bear to throw them away. However, as soon as Fatty Yu left the tavern, he saw a warrior wearing a black warrior suit, a black iron hat with golden patterns, and a black iron mask leaning against a tree opposite the tavern. The warrior was holding a saber and leaning against the tree. The expressionless black iron mask had a bloodstain that extended from his forehead to his chin. It looked strange and sinister. This was Chu Xiu's code name in the Blue Dragon Society. It was also his symbol. Looking at Fatty Yu, Chu Xiu walked over with his saber and said indifferently, "I won't stop you wherever you go. However, I'm here to borrow something from you today." Chu Xiu's eyes didn't show any emotion. He suddenly raised his head and there was only a cold, empty glint in his eyes. "I'll borrow your head-to-hand in the mission." Chapter 107. Although there was no rule stating that an assassin had to assassinate someone in the dark, for Chu Xiu to appear in public and say that he wanted to borrow someone's head to complete his mission, this action was either extremely arrogant or extremely confident. The wind broker from Wind Sweeping Tower was also shocked. This Chu Xiu was really fast. He had found this place in such a short amount of time. However, at this moment, whether it was him or the other martial artists in the tavern, they were all hiding far behind, not even daring to stick their heads out. If they were to join in a fight of this level, they probably wouldn't even know how they died. At this moment, when Fatty Yu saw Chu Xiu walking towards him with a saber in hand, cold sweat instantly flowed down his forehead. He had heard of Chu Xiu's fame. He was an existence ranked on the Longhu list, a ruthless person who had taken thousands of lives. Although they were both in the inner Qi realm, Fatty Yu didn't even have the confidence to block 3 moves from Chu Xiu. Therefore, without saying a word, Fatty Yu immediately turned around and fled. Although Fatty Yu's figure was extremely fat, his speed was very fast. In the blink of an eye, his fat figure had already run several feet away. Chu Xiu hadn't cultivated any speed-type movement skills. He directly condensed his earth energy and poured it into his legs. The explosive force was extremely shocking. After all, his inner force cultivation foundation was also extremely deep. The crimson saber was unsheathed. The stern and bloody chill could even be felt by Fatty Yu, who was several feet away. Just as the saber was about to reach him, Fatty Yu suddenly turned around and slapped at Chu Xiu with his left hand at an extremely fast speed. It was almost like an afterimage. The strangest thing was that his hand had strangely extended a lot. Before Chu Xiu's saber could slash at him, his palm would be able to cripple Chu Xiu's dantian. Fatty Yu had practiced this cloud-exploring hand technique for more than 20 years. In the end, it was practically second nature to him. However, at this moment, Chu Xiu had no intention of dodging at all. He directly met palm with palm and used the Great Purple Sun hand. The dark purple palm collided with Fatty Yu's cloud-exploring hand. With a loud sound of earth energy, Fatty Yu was directly sent flying. The purple sun demonic flames entered his body, causing him to immediately let out a miserable howl. However, before he could finish his howl, Fatty Yu felt like there was an endless whirlpool in Chu Xiu's eyes, pulling him into an endless abyss. In that instant, Fatty Yu lost control of his mind due to the intense pain. He was affected by Chu Xiu's soul-shifting art of extinguishing the heavens and extinguishing the earth. He was stunned for a moment and even forgot to scream. Although it was only for a short moment, it was enough for a martial artist like Chu Xiu who was proficient in swift sabers. A smear of crimson fell. Before Fatty Yu could regain his senses, Chu Xiu's saber had already completely chopped off his head. This time, his employer had said that he wanted Fatty Yu's head as a sacrifice to his father. Although it was a little troublesome, Chu Xiu had no reason to refuse since the employer had already increased his pay. With the head in hand, Chu Xiu brazenly disappeared on the official road. The people behind him subconsciously swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Although Fatty Yu's character wasn't very good, he was still considered a big shot in the Qingyang manor. After all, he was an expert at the inner energy realm. In the end, he was easily killed by Chu Xiu. The difficulty was no different from killing a chicken. This kind of terrifying strength had somewhat subverted their worldview. In particular, the martial artist from Wind Sweeping Pavilion couldn't help but think that the 18th place on the Longhu list that Wind Sweeping Pavilion had given Chu Xiu was a little low. Based on his strength, Chu Xiu should be ranked 8th. With this thought in mind, the wind agent from Wind Sweeping Pavilion suddenly chased after Chu Xiu. When Chu Xiu turned around with the head in hand, his gaze immediately caused the wind agent from Wind Sweeping Pavilion to feel a chill down his spine. You were the one who made the deal with this fatty just now, right? Why are you following me now? Do you want to avenge this fatty? The wind agent from Wind Sweeping Pavilion swallowed a mouthful of saliva and hurriedly said, "Official Chu, please don't misunderstand. I have nothing to do with this fatty. I just want to ask Official Chu something." "What's the matter?" Chu Xiu said coldly. The anemophilia hurriedly said, "I am Lu Yu, a third-grade wind agent from Wind Sweeping Pavilion's Daoist County branch. Official Chu, you have recently been ranked 18th on the Longhu list by Wind Sweeping Pavilion. However, there is still some information that is unclear, such as your martial arts and background. I wonder if you can tell me?" Chu Xiu looked at Lu Yu as if he was looking at an idiot and coldly said, "For a martial artist, martial arts is a trump card. Would you tell others about your trump card? And even openly announce it on the list?" Lu Yu hurriedly said, "Official Chu, you have misunderstood. Wind Sweeping Pavilion only wants the name of your martial arts, and it is the martial arts name that you have already used. It will not affect your trump card at all. Also, you can just pick out the good stuff about your background. What benefits do I get?" Lu Yu was taken aback. "It can increase your prestige on the Longhu list." Chu Xiu indifferently said, "A man is afraid of fame, and a pig is afraid of being fat. I have no interest in that. Moreover, I remember that Wind Sweeping Pavilion participated in the matter of trying to kill me. Aren't you afraid that I will kill you?" Lu Yu hurriedly shrunk his neck and said, "Official Chu, the person who provided you with the information was someone from the Linzhong County branch. It has nothing to do with me. Moreover, Wind Sweeping Pavilion is not trying to kill you. What we sell is information. If someone is willing to pay us, we cannot refuse to sell. Moreover, Wind Sweeping Pavilion has some cooperation with the Blue Dragon Society. If the Blue Dragon Society's assassins lose track of their target, they will come to Wind Sweeping Pavilion to buy information. Wind Sweeping Pavilion is absolutely neutral. This is something that everyone in the pugilistic world knows. As long as you buy information from Wind Sweeping Pavilion, we will definitely not sell it to anyone else. We will also not leak your information." Chu Xiu raised an eyebrow. He was actually quite curious about Wind Sweeping Pavilion. For example, when he was being chased, he didn't even see anyone from Wind Sweeping Pavilion. However, they were able to roughly pinpoint his location. It was quite miraculous. However, this was definitely Wind Sweeping Pavilion's specialty. Even if he asked, Wind Sweeping Pavilion would definitely not tell him. Therefore, Chu Xiu indifferently said, "I have no interest in the Longhu list. You can leave." When Lu Yu saw that Chu Xiu didn't kill him, he hurriedly took out a piece of paper and handed it to Chu Xiu. He said, "Official Chu, this is where I live and a number of ways to contact me. Official Chu, if you want to buy information, you can look for me. Wind Sweeping Pavilion's information is accurate and trustworthy. Official Chu, you can ask around. I can guarantee it. Chu Xiu accepted the piece of paper. Although he didn't need to buy information from Wind Sweeping Pavilion for now, he might really need it in the future. When Lu Yu saw Chu Xiu accept the piece of paper, the corner of his mouth also revealed a trace of a smile. Other people wouldn't dare to deal with Chu Xiu, who had killed countless people, but Lu Yu dared. In his eyes, there was no good or evil. There were only customers who wanted to buy information from him. With Chu Xiu's strength, if he wanted to buy information from Lu Yu, it would definitely be a big deal. He would definitely be more generous than that stingy fatty Yu. After Chu Xiu left, he directly took the head back to the Blue Dragon Society to hand in the mission. During this period of time, Chu Xiu had always been like this. The best way for him to practice his martial skills was through killing. Only then would he become more natural and proficient, especially the great art of extinguishing heaven and destroying earth, destroying soul shifting. This kind of spiritual power cultivation technique could only become stronger through continuous training with the opponent's spiritual power. In the Biling Mansion, Chu Xiu could only use the great art of extinguishing heaven and destroying earth, destroying soul shifting to slightly affect the Yu clan's third brother's mind. Now, however, he could forcibly control Fatty Yu and make him lose his mind for a moment. Although it was only for a short moment, for a martial artist, such a moment was enough to take the other party's life. After handing in the mission, Chu Xiu took the reward and continued to cultivate. However, at this moment, someone suddenly knocked on his door. When he opened it, he saw that it was Fire Slave and Wolf King Xiu Ming. This made Chu Xiu feel a little strange. The relationship between the hitmen of the Azure Dragon Society wasn't that good. But since the guilty branch had fewer members and more missions, it wasn't like the other branches where there was a problem of snatching missions. Therefore, the relationship between everyone wasn't that bad. With Chu Xiu's strength, the other low-level assassins would also respectfully call him Lord when they saw him. The Ghost Hand King and the others would also chat with him. However, that was the most they could do. When Chu Xiu was cultivating in seclusion, no one really came to disturb him. "What can I do for the two of you?" Fire Slave smiled and said, "It's like this. The Wolf King and I are going to take a level 4 mission. However, although it is level 4, it is close to level 5. The mission targets are 8 martial artists in the inner strong realm. However, the mission reward is also close to level 5, so it is quite worthwhile. The two of us are afraid that we can't handle it, so we want to ask Brother Chu to help us. The 3 of us will work together for this mission. After the mission, you will get 40% of the reward, and we will each get 30%. What do you think, Brother Chu?" Chu Xiu glanced at the mission reward that the employer took out. 40% was about twice as much as the mission to kill Fatty Yu. Moreover, it was normal to work together to carry out a mission in the Blue Dragon Society. Moreover, the two of them were also tactful. They knew that their strength was not as good as Chu Xiu, so they took the initiative to let Chu Xiu take the big head. Therefore, Chu Xiu nodded and said, "No problem, I agree." Fire Slave said, "That's good. The 3 of us will go and report to the branch leader. As long as the branch leader agrees, we will take action." Chu Xiu asked doubtfully, "Do we need the branch leader's permission for this kind of thing?" Fire Slave said, "If you carry out the mission alone, then the branch leader will naturally not care what you should do. However, for a group mission, unless the branch leader personally orders it, if we decide to do it ourselves, it will be a big taboo. There have been people who did this in the past, and the outcome was very miserable." Chapter 108. Speaking of the Heavenly Sin branch leader, the Fire Slave closed the door and whispered to Chu Xiu, you were personally recruited into the Azure Dragon gang by the branch leader. In fact, the two of us were recruited as well. The Ghost Hand King should have already told you that the Azure Dragon gang's rules are very simple. As long as you don't lose face, it's fine. However, you must abide by the Heavenly Sin Branch's rules, and that is to obey the branch leader's orders. Of course, with the branch lord's strength, we don't dare to disobey his orders. In any case, if you want to have a good time in the Heavenly Sin Branch, you just need to remember one thing. You are the branch lord's knife. Wherever he tells you to cut, you just have to cut. Chu Xiu secretly frowned. His memory of the Heavenly Sin Branch Lord was only the original plot where he schemed against a few large Northern Yen factions. It wasn't very clear, and he only had a general idea. In any case, this Branch Lord wasn't someone who would settle down. Of course, this might also be related to the current situation of the Heavenly Sin Branch. Their strength was already so weak, so it wasn't strange for them to be a little unconventional. However, after hearing Fire Slave's words, this Heavenly Sin Branch Lord's desire for control was very strong. Of course, this was also related to the system of the Blue Dragon Society. Almost all the branch lords were like local tyrants, and they held too much power in their hands. Chu Xiu cupped his hands at Fire Slave and said, "Thank you for telling me." Fire Slave laughed and said, "It's nothing. The Heavenly Sin Branch doesn't have many people, so there isn't much competition. Everyone is too lazy to fight. In the past, most of the group missions were carried out by me and the Wolf King. Ghost Hand King, that old guy, is now helping the branch lord to manage the branch. Naturally, the branch lord will give him rewards. He is too lazy to handle missions with little benefits. Cruel Sword and Tangya, one is cold and unsociable. When we went to find him, he was too lazy to agree. The other one has a strange temper. He is picky about normal missions, let alone missions like ours. Now that Brother Chu is here, we have one more helper. If there was no conflict of interest, there would naturally be less competition. As long as one wasn't an idiot, even if they didn't like each other, in this Sin Branch, no one would be bothered to fight. When Chu Xiu and the others went to look for the Heavenly Sin Division leader, the Heavenly Sin Division leader looked at the mission and didn't find any problems. He nodded and said, "All right, you can go. However, it's best if you go alone. You can also train your own abilities." Look at Chu Xiu, didn't he also complete a level 5 mission alone? You even made it into the Longhu leaderboard and brought glory to the Heavenly Sin Branch. You always think of relying on numbers to accomplish things. When will you be able to stand on your own? The Fire Slave and Wolf King nodded their heads in agreement when they heard the Heavenly Sin Branch Master's words. However, Chu Xiu secretly frowned his brows as he felt that something was amiss. Although the Heavenly Sin Branch Master's words were praising him, he was actually praising him. It was obvious that he was trying to sow discord between him and the Fire Slave, Wolf King, and the others. He was very familiar with this kind of scheming of a superior. He had seen it in both his previous and current lives. It was nothing more than wanting his subordinates to be too united. It wasn't a good thing for a superior to have subordinates of one mind. However, Chu Xiu still felt that this Heavenly Sin Branch Master was a little narrow-minded. It wasn't a problem to have this kind of mentality, but it also depended on the situation and time. Currently, the Heavenly Sin Branch was weak and needed to develop with all its strength. However, the Heavenly Sin Branch Master was still trying to sow discord. It was a little too ungenerous. It was unknown whether the Fire Slave and Wolf King hid their intentions well or they really didn't have any schemes. In any case, when the Heavenly Sin Branch Master spoke, they didn't show any malice towards Chu Xiu. As for the Heavenly Sin Branch Master's behavior, the Fire Slave, Wolf King, and Chu Xiu tacitly didn't mention it. Instead, they started discussing the mission. Chu Xiu asked, "Who is the target of this mission?" The Fire Slave said, it's the Zhang family of Linzhong Commandery. The one who asked them to take action is a branch of the Zhang family in Daoist Commandery. Speaking of which, this mission of the Zhang family is very interesting. This is also the first time I've received a mission to kill one of our own. In the past, the Zhang family of Linzhong Commandery was a really big family. How big was it? More than 300 years ago, the Zhang family's power could even contend for being one of the 9 big families in the pugilistic world. Unfortunately, I don't know what happened to the Zhang family. In just a few decades, they actually began to rapidly decline. Now, the entire Zhang family doesn't even have a single physical invulnerability realm martial artist. The Zhang family's branch in Daoist Commandery was only a collateral branch of the Zhang family. They were responsible for managing some of the Zhang family's businesses in Daoist Commandery. However, when the Zhang family's direct line of descent began to decline, the collateral branch completely rose. Its power was even greater than the Zhang family's direct line of descent. These two families haven't communicated with each other for almost 100 years. Recently, the Zhang family of Linzhong Commandery seemed to be unable to survive in the local area. They actually contacted the Zhang family of Daoist Commandery, hoping to merge the two families and restore the Zhang family's former glory. What's even more unbelievable is that someone from the Zhang family of Daoist Commandery actually agreed. Brother Chu, don't you think this is ridiculous? Chu Xiao was slightly speechless. This was the first time he had heard of such a strange thing. He didn't know what the Zhang family of Daoist Commandery was thinking. Even an idiot would know that although the two families shared the same surname and ancestor, the people were different. Currently, the Zhang family of Daoist Commandery was powerful. However, the Zhang family of Linzhong Commandery was the direct line of descent. After the two families merged, who would they listen to? Huanu chuckled and said, even the elders of the Zhang family of Daoist Commandery agreed to merge the two families. I'm afraid they are senile. However, the young people of the Zhang family of Daoist Commandery have their own ideas. They directly pooled a large amount of resources and property to let us rob and kill the people of the Zhang family of Linzhong Commandery. By the way, the Zhang family of Linzhong Commandery has some enmity with you, Brother Chu. Chu Xiao thought for a while and said, enmity? Why can't I remember when I have offended such a family? Or, among the people I killed, who is related to the Zhang family? Chu Xiao had killed quite a number of people in Linzhong Commandery. The majority of martial artists had complicated relationships in the pugilistic world. It was possible that the person you killed was someone's good friend or relative. This was a definite possibility. Huanu shook his head and said, you haven't offended them. However, among the martial arts forces that participated in the pursuit of you, the Zhang family also sent people. There was even an internal strength realm martial artist, but he didn't meet you face to face. Chu Xiao nodded in understanding. So this was the case. It didn't matter. When the righteous manor issued an order for arrest, almost all the martial arts forces in Linzhong Commandery, big and small, took action. Among them, some went for the reputation of the righteous manor, and some went for the secret box of the absolute heaven demon venerable on Chu Xiao. If Chu Xiao really wanted to take revenge, he would probably have to slaughter the entire Linzhong Commandery. Huanu looked at Chu Xiao and said, Brother Chu, Wolf King and I are crude people. We don't have much experience in dealing with such a large number of people. This time, I'll leave the plan to you. Chu Xiao said indifferently, the other party only has 8 internal strength realm martial artists. With the 3 of us taking action, is there a need for a plan? Huanu and Wolf King were a little stunned. However, after thinking about it carefully, they realized that it was true. Although the Heavenly Sin branch was short of people, not everyone could join the Blue Dragon Society. Otherwise, it wouldn't matter if people died. However, if they kept failing the mission, it would be a disgrace to the Blue Dragon Society. Therefore, to be able to become an assassin of the Blue Dragon Society, one had to at least be the best among the martial artists of the same rank. 3 against 8 sounded a little boastful, but for the 3 of them, it really wasn't a difficult task. Especially Chu Xiu, he was an existence that stepped into the top 20 of the Longhu leaderboard. Basically, there were few martial artists of the same rank who could rival him. After making the preparations, the 3 went to meet the employer. The person who came to ask the Blue Dragon Society for help was actually a young man in his 20s. Seeing the 3 people in front of him, the young man handed over the target's information and cupped his hands. "I'm Zhang Tianqi. May I know your names?" Seeing that the Blue Dragon Society only sent 3 internal strength realm martial artists, Zhang Tianqi was a little dissatisfied. The commission he offered was not small, but the other party only sent 3 people. Wasn't this a little too perfunctory? The information about the Blue Dragon Society was a little vague to a young man like Zhang Tianqi. He only knew that within the Blue Dragon Society, only Blood Demon, Tangya, and Cruel Sword were famous. However, he didn't know how to identify them. If one of the 3 people in front of him was one of them, then it would be fine. However, the tone of distrust in his words was a little obvious. The Wolf King directly snorted and said, "Why are you asking so much? It's fine as long as they can help you kill people. Why, do you want to specially assign an assassin to kill people? Alright, double the commission. You can choose any assassin from the Blue Dragon Society." Zhang Tianqi was immediately choked by the Wolf King's words. These things were taken out by the core generation and the younger generation of the family, and they did it behind the old fools in the family. If they were to take out double the commission, the Zhang family wouldn't be able to afford it even if they sold themselves. After laughing awkwardly, Zhang Tianqi said, "There is one more thing that I need to trouble the 3 of you with. The target of this mission is only the 8 internal invulnerability experts of the Zhang family from Linzhong Commandery. As for the other martial artists of the Zhang family, please hold back. As long as we get rid of the 8 internal invulnerability experts, the Zhang family of Daoist Commandery is still confident of swallowing the rest." Upon hearing this, the Wolf King and the Fire Slave coldly snorted. Chu Xiu also sneered and said, "The people of the Blue Dragon Society only know how to kill people and won't release people. As for how many people we kill, it naturally depends on our mood. Do you really think that you can become the Jade Emperor just by spending money? Our Blue Dragon Society only kills people and doesn't serve people. Why would we have so many requests?" After saying that, Chu Xiu directly turned around and left. The Wolf King and the Fire Slave also didn't continue to pay attention to this idiot. Their Blue Dragon Society wasn't like other small assassin organizations, where they could still raise conditions and bargain with you. One sentence, use it if you want. If you dare to speak rudely, I'll kill you too. Zhang Tianqi's face alternated between red and white. Facing the Blue Dragon Society, he still hadn't figured out his own identity and status. In front of the Blue Dragon Society, even if the Zhang family was the employer, so what? They still didn't have the right to bargain. Previously, when Zhang Tianqi went to the wind-sweeping brothel to buy information, although the wind-sweeping brothel was more powerful than the Zhang family, the middlemen were all polite. However, that was only because of the identity of the anemophilia. No matter how big or small the identity of the customer was, as long as they took the money, they had to treat the customer like the Jade Emperor. However, the nature of the Blue Dragon Society was different from the wind-sweeping brothel. Do you expect a bunch of assassins to speak nicely to you? Zhang Tianqi was probably thinking too much. Zhang Tianqi snorted coldly and didn't dare to say anything else. He quickly returned to the Zhang family to report. Chapter 109. 3 days later, at midnight, on the official road from Linzhong Commandery to Daoist Commandery, a team of dozens of people was slowly moving forward. They were the people of the Zhang family of Linzhong Commandery. To be honest, the Zhang family had been living a miserable life in Linzhong Commandery in recent years. Of course, they could not blame others for this. They could only blame themselves for going too far in the past. In the past, when the Zhang family was strong, they were famous in the whole East Yan, not to mention the entire Linzhong Commandery. They were one step away from becoming one of the 9 great families in Jianghu. At that time, the Zhang family was very overbearing and offended many people. As a result, when the Zhang family weakened, it was naturally the turn of other forces to hit them when they were down. Over the years, the Zhang family had been suppressed by other forces in Linzhong Commandery. Not much of their past heritage was left. It was simply getting more and more dilapidated year by year. Therefore, the Zhang family had been thinking of a way out for a long time. Originally, they did not take the collateral branches in Daoist Commandery seriously. However, later they gradually found that they were doing better than the direct descendants. This made the Zhang family of Linzhong Commandery have some other ideas. They wanted to communicate with the other side. Previously, they still had the idea of contacting the other side. They did not expect things to go so smoothly. The Zhang family in Daoist Commandery directly agreed to let them move to Daoist Commandery. This time, the Zhang family mainly sent some masters and direct descendants with some of the more valuable treasures of the Zhang family. The rest of the ordinary materials and clansmen would only come with them after they arrived in Daoist Commandery and settled everything. The head of the Zhang family, Zhang Yuanfeng, looked around but didn't find any inn. There seemed to be a dilapidated temple on a small hill not far away. There was still a faint light of fire in the temple. There should be people resting in the temple. Zhang Yuanfeng said to the others, "It's getting late. Let's not leave for now. Let's rest in the dilapidated temple tonight." As he said this, he led the other warriors of the Zhang family to the broken temple on the hill. At this time, in the broken temple, Chu Xiu, Fire Slave, and Wolf King were setting up a bonfire and roasting 3 chickens. Fire Slave was in charge of roasting. While roasting, he sprinkled all kinds of seasonings on the roasted chicken. After a while, a rich aroma wafted out. The Wolf King praised from the side, "Your culinary skills are really good. If your martial arts are crippled one day, you won't starve to death even if you become a cook." Fire Slave glanced at him and said, "If you still dare to speak like this after being crippled, I guarantee that you will be beaten to death the next day." The Fire Slave looked at Chu Xiu and said proudly, "Brother Chu, it tastes good, right? When I was a slave in the western region, I learned this from the sacred fire race. At that time, I was a slave in charge of roasting meat for them. It was a good job. Other slaves didn't even have enough to eat, but I could eat until my mouth was full. It's also because of this that I was able to secretly learn the sacred flame race's cultivation technique and quickly cultivate to blood condensation before escaping. Otherwise, how can they cultivate if they don't even have enough to eat?" Fire Slave had never cared about his background. Practically everyone in the Heavenly Sin branch knew about it. Of course, that was only because he didn't care. If someone dared to joke about his background, they would know just how terrifying his methods were. To the side, the Wolf King suddenly said, "The Zhang family should have arrived, right? What if they haven't come to rest in this broken temple?" Chu Xiu indifferently said, "If they haven't arrived, then they haven't arrived. Once we're full, we'll directly chase after them and kill them." The Wolf King shrugged. Having an expert overseeing things was really different. The mission was easily carried out. At this time, Chu Xiu suddenly said, "They're here. The Zhang family's people have come up the mountain." Because he cultivated the heaven-extinguishing earth soul-shifting art, his perception was much higher than the Wolf King and Fire Slave's. Fire Slave laughed mischievously, "There's no rush. Let's eat first." After a while, the Zhang family's people all came up the mountain. When they opened the door to the temple, they saw 3 people roasting food. Because they were preparing to eat, the bamboo hats and masks were a bit in the way, so the three of them had put them behind their backs. They had also withdrawn their auras. At a glance, Chu Xiu's group of three only had the strength of body tempering or blood condensation. One of the Zhang family's youths looked around the temple and felt that it was a bit small. He couldn't help looking at Chu Xiu and taking out a silver ingot. He coldly snorted, "You three, get out of the way." Zhang Yuanfeng frowned, "First come, first served. They came here first, so why are we chasing them away? No matter how small this place is, it's enough for you to sleep. Don't cause trouble." The youth could only take back the silver ingot and unhappily said, "Yes, father." The Zhang family's people all stayed on the other side of the temple. Zhang Yuanfeng glanced at Chu Xiu's group of three. He felt that there was something wrong with them. Ordinary low-level cultivators would definitely be scared to the point that they would take the initiative to get out of the way when they saw so many experts. However, these three seemed to completely ignore them. Their attention was completely focused on the roast chicken, as if they weren't as attractive as the roast chicken. However, Zhang Yuanfeng didn't think too much about it. The older cultivators of Jianghu were all old foxes. On the other hand, the younger ones were more spirited and arrogant, thinking that they wouldn't fear authority. Only after falling a few times did they learn what it meant to be awed. Chu Xiu's group of three looked very young. Zhang Yuanfeng thought that the three of them were inexperienced cultivators, so he didn't pay much attention to them. After a few days of traveling, he was also a little tired. He instructed the others to eat their rations and go to bed. At this time, the chicken on Chu Xiu's side was also roasted. The tempting aroma was getting stronger and stronger. The Zhang family's young master glanced at the dry rations in his hand and immediately lost interest. He took out silver ingots and threw them at the feet of Chu Xiu's group. He said loudly, "The silver ingots are yours. Bring the roast chicken over." However, Chu Xiu's group of three acted as if they didn't see the silver ingots. They directly took the roast chicken and bit into it. Seeing this scene, the Zhang family's young master was immediately enraged. He wanted to flare up, but he was stopped by Zhang Yuanfeng. "Have you forgotten what I told you at home? Don't cause trouble. Otherwise, you will be punished according to the family rules." Seeing his father speak, the Zhang family's young master could only glare fiercely at Chu Xiu's group of three and bite into the tasteless rations in his hand. Seeing his son's behavior, Zhang Yuanfeng also sighed helplessly. In fact, when Zhang Yuanfeng was young, he was even more overbearing and arrogant than his son. However, as he grew older, the Zhang family also declined year by year. He also understood that the Zhang family couldn't continue like this. In the past, the Zhang family had been too arrogant and overbearing. They had made too many enemies, which led to the decline of the Zhang family. Once they were in decline, countless people would kick them when they were down. Therefore, when they left home this time, he had already told the Zhang family's disciples that they had to keep a low profile and not cause trouble. The Zhang family's reputation in Linzhong County was already bad. If they were to go to Mount Tai County, there would be no place for them to stay at all. Unfortunately, habits couldn't be changed in a short period of time. Looking at his son's current behavior was proof. After a quarter of an hour, Chu Xiu and the others also finished their roast chicken. The three of them wiped their hands, took out the bamboo hats and masks behind them, and slowly put them on. This scene fell into the eyes of the Zhang family's people, causing their movements to gradually stiffen. At first, they didn't react because the black warrior suit wasn't considered special. There were many martial artists in the pugilistic world who wore it. However, when the black warrior suit was matched with the black iron bamboo hat and black iron mask with golden patterns, three words involuntarily appeared in their minds. Blue Dragon Society. This group of people actually sat together with three Blue Dragon Society assassins for such a long time. At this moment, Zhang Yuanfeng was even more shocked than the others. Although the Zhang family had declined, they still had a foundation. Therefore, it could be said that they were quite familiar with the rules of the Blue Dragon Society. Ordinary assassins of the Blue Dragon Society would only wear a black iron mask, and those with patterns on the mask were the assassins with code names. The true elites of the Blue Dragon Society. Zhang Yuanfeng suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. Chu Xiu adjusted the bamboo hat on his head, picked up the knife, and said faintly, "After eating and drinking, it's time to kill." With that said, he turned his gaze to Zhang Yuanfeng and the others. Everyone should also be full, right? It's not bad to go down and be a full ghost. The moment Chu Xiu's voice fell, Zhang Yuanfeng had already jumped up. The long sword in his hand carried a hot aura, as strong as fire, and directly slashed at Chu Xiu. "Do it!" Zhang Yuanfeng shouted, but unfortunately, the Zhang family's inner strong realm martial artists behind him seemed to be a little slow. They didn't react in time, which led to Zhang Yuanfeng rushing at Chu Xiu alone. The crimson knife light flashed in front of Zhang Yuanfeng's eyes. Azure dragon in the sleeve, diving abyss to sea. This extremely fast saber strike arrived first even though it was launched later. A loud bang rang out as the saber and sword collided. A sinister and bloody baleful aura suddenly erupted. It was an extremely dense baleful aura. As Chu Xiu slaughtered more people, the baleful aura condensed from his piercing the sun and moon technique grew stronger. Even when he stepped into the inner strong realm, he could even condense the blood aura on the surface of the weapon, which was far more powerful than ordinary gang qi. An extremely chilling and bloody aura erupted. Zhang Yuanfeng's body was unable to withstand the powerful force and was forced to retreat. His sword-wielding hand trembled, and blood flowed uncontrollably from the webbing between his thumb and index finger. However, before he could defend himself, Chu Xiu's figure followed him like a shadow, closely following him. The drizzle was crimson red, and the extremely magnificent sword intent descended like a continuous drizzle. Zhang Yuanfeng, who was within it, felt a ferocious killing intent and death intent assaulting him. You're tuning in to the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.